recording? Okay, good. Good evening and welcome to the South Burlington Development Review Board for Tuesday, March 15th, 2022. It's the Ides of March. My name is Dawn Philibert and I'm the chair of this DRB. And with us tonight are other board members, Mark Baer, Frank Kochman, Jim Langen, Stephanie Wyman, Dan Albrecht, and Quinn Mann. And also with us from the City of South Burlington are Marla Keene, our Development Review Planner, and Delilah Hall, our Zoning Administrator. There are a number of ways to participate in this meeting. Are there any people in the auditorium, Marla?
There are not.
Okay, so a lot of people are joining virtually, and that's fine. We did make a decision tonight that the board will be meeting in person from now on. So at our next meeting, which is April 5th, board members will be at City Hall in person holding the meeting. People can still participate virtually if they want to. If you do participate virtually, we ask a couple of things. Please mute your microphone and turn your camera off until you're recognized and you're going to speak, and then you can both unmute your mic and participate, turn your camera on. And if you want to participate, just raise your hand during the public comments section and we'll acknowledge you when it's your turn to speak. And please avoid having conversations in the chat box because it can be distracting to us, and also it's not part of the public record. So we ask that you avoid doing that. So thank you. So first, let me talk about agenda item number 1, emergency evacuation procedures. It sounds like it's a moot point since no one's in the auditorium. So we'll move on to number 2, which are additions, deletions, or changes in the order of agenda items. Are there any?
No.
Okay, so announcements and reminders. Thank you for attending. Just to let you know, this meeting is being recorded and can be viewed at any time. And let's see, comments, I've already covered that information. Let me look at the agenda, announcements. Are there any comments or questions from the public that aren't related to the agenda tonight? Hearing none, we will go ahead and move on to agenda item number 5, and I will read what that is. It's preliminary plat application SD 2203 of Rivers Edge Building Development LLC for the 3.6 acre Park Road area phase of a previously approved master plan for a 450 acre golf course and 354 unit residential development. The planned unit development consists of consolidating 3 existing lots for the purpose of constructing 14 dwelling units in 2 family homes on 2 private roads at 1170 and 1180 Dorset Street. Before we move on, are there any recusals or does anyone have anything to announce in terms of conflicts of interest, disclosures? Okay, hearing none. Who is here for the applicant, please?
I am Dan Heil with O'Leary Burke Civil Associates.
Hi, Dan.
Hi.
Anyone? Are you the only person?
I believe Paul Brogna or Peter Shepard were going to log on, but I didn't see if they were on,
Okay.
But they were planning on it.
Okay, let's swear you in, and then when they join, if they join, we'll swear them in. Would you please raise your right hand? And do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, why don't you give us a brief overview of this project? We saw you at Sketch, but give us a little update on the proposal, and then we'll start to move through the staff comments.
Sure. First of all, I have to apologize in advance. I'm working my way through a cold, so you'll have to bear with me tonight. Yeah, the project is located at 1170-1180 Dorset Street. It's at the southeast corner of the Park Road and Dorset Street intersection. It's made up of 3 existing parcels, all within the Southeast Quadrant Neighborhood Residential Zoning District. It's also part of the Vermont National Country Club Golf Course PUD. The project's a little unique in that it is subject to a settlement agreement between the city of South Burlington and the owner of the golf course, which approved a 2015 master plan for the overall golf course PUD. And under that master plan, the subject area that we're developing is referred to as the Park Road Development Area, and allows for a maximum of 15 units. And it's also subject to the 2003 land development regulations. So while a maximum of 15 units are allowed, we are proposing 14 units as we feel this is what works best for the site, given the size of the units and the site constraints. These units will consist of 7 duplex units, which will be accessed by one of 2 private drives off Park Road. All units will be served by municipal water and sewer. Stormwater will be handled via infiltration basin, gravel wetland, and dry pond. And that's located, the infiltration basin is kind of located in the center of the site at the end of Private Road B, and the gravel wetland and dry pond are located in the northeastern portion of the site. There is a class 2 wetland that was delineated on the parcel. It's on the eastern side, and there is a 50-foot buffer associated with that. And we are not proposing any impacts to the wetland or the buffer as part of this proposal. As you mentioned, we did have sketch back in August of 2021. And due to feedback we received from the board and staff at sketch, we revised the plans to maximize the distance between private road A and B. Private road A is on the western portion of the site, and private road B is on the eastern portion. We shifted private road B 20 feet to the east, and we've included correspondence in our submittal from the Department of Public Works confirming that the entrance locations are acceptable. We've also included a traffic impact assessment prepared by Roger Dickinson of Lamoureux and Dickinson, who stated that the relatively small volume of additional traffic will not create an unsafe traffic condition. So we shifted that entrance in sketch. We also revised private road B due to feedback from the board and staff to 26 feet. It was previously 20 feet with some parallel parking spaces, but now it's 26 feet, which allows for on-street parking on the western side. We added a 5-foot sidewalk adjacent to private road B and in between the 2 entrances for pedestrian connectivity. And we added a crosswalk just to the east of private road A, connecting to the city recreational path on the north side of Park Road. We also included a landscape plan with our preliminary submittal by Mike Lawrence. This consists of berms along Dorset Street, which the DRB was in favor of at sketch, and street trees will be provided along Park Road, private road A, and private road B. We're also proposing foundation plantings around all units. We also updated the building and lot coverage computations to include the overall Vermont National parcel, and we included the Wheeler parcel or Zoe Circle just to the north of our site on the other side of Park Road in those computations, so they're up to date. And lastly, we included elevations and pictures of the proposed duplex units. And we also included renderings from Nate Collins of digital medium solutions depicting the proposed development in relation to the surrounding area, Park Road and Dorset Street. So that's really an overview of the project.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Have your partners joined us yet?
Let me check
It
participants.
looks like they have,
I
yeah.
think they have.
Okay, and what are their names again, please?
I see Peter Shepard on there and Paul Brogna is on there as well.
Okay. Peter and Paul, if you're going to, are you planning to testify?
I wasn't planning on it, but
Okay.
if there's a question that needs an answer that I have the
Okay.
answer to, I certainly will.
Okay, let's go ahead and swear the two of you in. Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear to tell the whole truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, under penalty of perjury?
I do.
I do.
Thank you. Okay. So let's go ahead and start working our way through the staff comments. So the first comment, I'm going to read this. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to demonstrate the height maximum is not exceeded prior to closing the preliminary plat, since the units are built into the hillside and are required, and the required maximum height may be greater than 40 feet as designed. So how do you demonstrate that, and what can you say about that?
Yep. So first of all units will be less than the 40 feet maximum height requirement. While we understand this is typically reviewed at building permit, we have forwarded an updated sheet 3 to staff depicting the proposed building height in relation to the pre-construction grade. So we sent that to staff, and based on the proposed building height, and that's measured from the average pre-construction grade around the unit to the peak of the proposed unit. We've included a table in revised sheet 3 demonstrating that all units will be below 40 feet.
I have that
Okay.
open now. It's in the supplemental if the board wants to see it, but there's a table in the top right of the supplemental drawing, and it appears they did the calculation correctly. It's
Okay.
a little bit different than what we're used to, because in the 2003 regulations, building height is measured to the apex of the roof, not the midpoint. But it appears they've done that calculation correctly.
Okay, so we're good. Okay, thank you. Staff comment number 2, this is regarding the wetland buffer. I won't read it, but what can you tell us about that, applicant?
Yeah, so as depicted on the plan, we are not proposing any impacts to the wetland or its associated 50-foot buffer. While some of the units may be as close as 15 feet to that buffer, there isn't a buffer from the buffer. And that 15 feet will allow for adequate room for construction. At the beginning of construction, silt fence will go up along that wetland buffer. That'll be one of the first things that goes in prior to any earthwork to ensure that there are no impacts during construction. And there's regular erosion control inspections, and that'll be inspected during construction. And after construction, we are proposing a split rail fence along the buffer area on the eastern portion of the site. This is called out on sheet 3 of the plan. It's we on the eastern portion of the site, we mentioned start of split rail fence extend to southerly property line. So there will be a permanent demarcation there. Typically, when we see unauthorized impacts to wetlands or their buffer, a lot of times they're on single family lots. It's hard to police a single family lot, especially if your adjacent neighbors far away. The way this project is set up, it will be governed by the homeowners association, and there'll be legal documents in place to protect that too. So for whatever chance there was a buffer impact, it would be a lot easier to spot. And the association would be responsible for enforcing that. If not, the state would be notified, and they would get in touch with the association. But we are not proposing any impacts to the wetland buffer. We are proposing temporary and permanent demarcation of that buffer area.
Thank you, Dan. Board members, does anyone have any questions? Concerns? Marla, do you have any?
I think that while everything Dan has said is very factual, and I don't dispute any of it, I do sort of recall the board in a similar instance on another project that I believe Learberg was actually involved in, being concerned about sort of the quality of folks' experience that live in the homes that have, that the backyard is non-existent because there's a fence right there. And I don't know, to what degree the board continues to have that concern with this project. This project has a master plan approval for 15 units if such units can be fit onto the site and meet all the regulations. But it's not that it has to have 15 units. And in fact, they've gone down to 14 here. So I just, I guess I just want to bring it back to that thought that, like, what is the quality of life when your back door is right on top of a wetland fence?
Board members, thoughts?
I had sort of a concern on the other side of that, based on what I thought the board had discussed on another project, which is a split rail fence kind of adequate to protect the buffer when you're within 15 feet of the house?
Well, Frank, I think that the one thing we have is that there's going to be a homeowners association that's going to be, tasked with maintaining it, as opposed to if it was a split rail on a single family home property where you would have very little control over it.
I also, people will know what they're buying, and not everybody wants a lot of backyard. So am I correct in assuming that anybody who buys one of these units is going to be aware of how narrow it is out back?
Yes, in the past, we've seen the mistake of the split rail fence go in after the homeowner's been in the unit. Here, the split rail fence will go in prior to, so the homeowner knows exactly what they are buying. They'll be shown the plans, they'll be shown where the split rail fence is. If they walk the site, they will see the approximate location of their unit and where that split rail fence is. So they will be aware of what they are buying and that where that split rail fence is located.
Okay.
Is there any signage that can say wetland buffer? Is that a practice?
I don't think it's a requirement, but we can certainly include that just so the homeowners association and the future homeowners are aware what the intended the demarcation of that split rail fence is for.
I think it would be great because
Definitely.
it is so close, and I just, you know how it is.
We've definitely required that on previous projects, like
Right.
every third post or every other post or something gets a sign tacked to it saying, wetland buffer beyond, no pesticides, no clear cut, whatever it is, the standard language sign. We've definitely done it in the past.
Is
That's a
just
great
curious,
idea.
are people allowed to walk in the wetland buffer? Does the property line extend into the wetland buffer? Or is it all
So-
common land?
It's all common land. I believe that's a good question. I'd have to check with the state on that. I believe they'd be able to walk in there, but you can't maintain it. You can't mow it. You really can't impact it. But I don't know that a passive recreational use would be excluded, but we can certainly verify that with the state.
I mean, I guess whatever is consistent and make sure it's not really your problem as an engineer, but the HOA, don't they usually have to file their documents for approval? Marla?
Yeah, legal.
Yeah, so there would be documents that say that there's no mowing in the buffer. One thing I would note is that this is preliminary by itself,
Yeah.
not combined preliminary and final. So if the board is inclined to have them propose some signage, That can be a pretty open-ended condition, unlike when we're looking at final, where, we have to nail it down. You could just say, the applicant shall propose some signage, and then they can propose it, and we can talk about it at final plat.
Yeah, and I think also prior to final, the applicant should look into what uses are allowed within the wetland buffer and make sure that whatever the uses they want and are allowed are included in the final decision and somehow, delineate or shown or however they, do it.
Yeah, I would agree. And I don't know if there's some sort of the draft HOA language and all that, so.
Right.
So I have a question. In back of homes 13 and 14, before the wetland buffer begins, or the fence, before where the fence is that considered common land too?
Everything outside of the building footprints is common land.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, thank you for clarifying.
Yep.
So
Any
there are no limited common elements?
No, there are not any limited common elements at this point. We weren't proposing any limited common elements on here.
So no patios, nothing like that?
No patios. There'll be decks on the rear of the units, or perhaps they would be a patio, depending on what the future homeowner wants, but that would all be included in their footprint lot.
Okay, are we ready to move on? Okay. Comment number 3, I'm going to read this as well. Staff anticipates the project might proceed to final plat before the Zoe Circle project receives Act 250 approval, and therefore recommends the board require the project to include the needed water line on Park Road to supply this project prior to closing the preliminary plat hearing. Staff considers the remaining comments of the South Burlington Water District can be addressed as conditions of preliminary plat approval. Thoughts about that, Dan?
Yep, so we have no issue with that. Right now, we are showing the water line along Park Road as approved because that was approved under the Zoe Circle development, but we can certainly show that as proposed in the event that we start construction prior to Zoe Circle.
Great. Any comments from the board or questions? Okay, let's move on to page 7. There's a number of comments. And number 4 is requiring a ledge plan.
Can I provide a little background on this section?
Sure.
So this is where it sketched, the board kind of discussed whether to require the homes and the eastern road to be swapped. There are a bunch of reasons given for that. And then the applicant had a lot of discussion. The applicant made a lot of points of their own, and the board had a really great discussion. And my notes literally write, the board had a really great discussion. And ultimately felt that the incremental, this is what I wrote, and basically what I'm going to say at the end here is that would like you to confirm that you still feel the same way, because now it's like a written decision. The board ultimately concluded that the incremental improvement in safety by swapping the homes was not, didn't warrant the reductions in quality of neighborhood that it would require to swap those things. So there's a lot of discussion here, and we did make these specific points 4 through 7 because at the time the applicant said, it'd be a detriment to the project because of ledge and because these other things. And so these are basically like, okay, you said it, now it's time to have a written decision, so substantiate it. And board, are you still in the same place as you were before?
And do those comments apply to 4 through 7?
Yes.
Okay, so let's take them one at a time. What are our thoughts about a ledge plan?
Well, hold on. So Don, when it says a ledge plan, now I saw in the comments, the applicant also stated that by swapping them, they would need there would be far more substantial ledge removal, correct?
Mhm.
So I think especially given the project directly across the street, we're definitely want a ledge removal plan and the same conditions that we were imposing on the project across the street in terms of, ledge removal plan and.
Timing and
Yeah,
frequency.
exactly. So, I mean, I'm more inclined if there is substantial ledge removal to swap the houses, and they've proven through the sightline study and the traffic study and all that, which it seems as though they've also included, that the proposed layout as shown in this current submission, while not ideal, is better given the changes that would have to occur with the other layout, I guess is a very uneloquent way of saying it.
So are you saying leave it as it's proposed, but still come up with a ledge plan for any?
Oh, yeah, definitely
okay.
still need the ledge removal plan, but
Okay.
given their testimony that by swapping the houses 9 through 14 and the road to split it out would increase the ledge removal substantially, but regardless, they need a ledge removal plan.
Okay. And any other comments on the board before I ask the applicant if, Dan, ledge plan, is that, something you can tell us you'll have?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
We
good.
completely agree that a ledge plan will be provided as part of our final plat submittal.
Okay, great, thanks.
Can I say one more thing too?
Sure.
While we did mention that swapping the road with 9 through 14 may result in more blasting, as we believe the majority of the ledge is kind of in between that upper area and lower area, kind of drops off steeply. So we think that there's more ledge there. I want to reiterate that the main reason we didn't want to swap those units, and we discussed this with the board, was privacy and aesthetics. If you swap those units 9 through 14, the back of those units would be facing at least 8 through 6. And so you'd have 8 through 6 facing the back of 9 through 14 and vice versa. So rather than looking out on this pristine wetland for units 9 through 14, you'd be looking at a neighbor's wall, or even worse, in a neighbor's window. There just wouldn't be much privacy there. And also driving down Park Road, you would see, the back of those units. So while there may be more blasting by swapping the road, we feel this layout as shown provides and maximizes privacy and aesthetics for the parcel. That was the main reason that we wanted to keep that this way.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions from the board? All right,
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, yeah. All right, number 5, which addresses the distance between roads. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to clarify why this change, which is contrary to the LDR cited above.
Yeah, so what this is saying is that their cover letter said they shifted the road to the east 20 feet, but then when we measured it, it looks like they actually shifted it to the west 20 feet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Dan?
I'm confused by this comment. We shifted it 20, private road B, the eastern road, we shifted it 20 feet to the east. Previously, we had around 113 feet between entrances measured from center line to center line. We are now proposing around 133 feet. So we tried to maximize separation as best we can, given the site constraints and wetlands and driveways and all of that. And so at sketch, the board asked us to go back and look to maximize that separation. And, that's what we did. Yeah, I guess I would ask staff to clarify what they're looking at, perhaps, when they measure, 20 feet in the other direction.
Yeah.
Marla,
I came up with the same initial number, 113, and then I came up with 90 when I measured the new plan from center to center.
From center to center, the
Yeah.
new plan is 133.
I mean, I can do it again.
Is this something that can be addressed offline between now and final plat?
I mean, ultimately, let me go back to the comment itself, because ultimately it's not the, it's the effect of the change, right? It just,
I know on, Marla, do you have the sketch plan available with the ortho on? Because I think it's kind of clear on the ortho, you can see the shadow of a tree by that eastern road. You can kind of use that as reference to see.
What was
like
the
on-
date of our,
Marla, I just measured it and I got about 133.
okay. Okay, well, I mean, I think this is a situation where we take their word for it, and if they're wrong, then, you know, they know just as well as we do that they have a problem, so that's,
Wait a minute, we have a plan to scale that shows the two roads, right?
yeah, so maybe I mismeasured it. It's not something I can do on the fly right now.
what
Okay,
was the date of our, oh, when was the sketch plan? Oh, August 3rd, okay. I just wanted to pull it up.
Yeah, if you go to sheet 1 of our current set, you can, it has the ortho photo on, and you can see along the eastern road, there is, you can see the shadow of a tree, like right at the center line. You can kind of use that as a reference point when comparing the two plans, but we are providing 133 feet. So I was thinking if we had the sketch plan side by side with that, you'd be able to see the shift. But
all right, can we move on?
I got a quick question.
Sure,
Is
Dan.
there something later in the staff comment where we talk about the alignment of that crosswalk?
Yes.
Okay, I'll wait for
Is there?
I don't remember it.
Maybe not. We talk about the lighting for the crosswalk, but not the alignment of it.
And the alignment of the roads. But what is your question, Dan?
then. Well, I have a comment about the crosswalk, but I want to ask it at the appropriate time.
I think now is a good
Marla, I
time.
just,
Yeah, if it's not in a red comment, it's not going to come up. So go ahead, Dan.
So why is the crosswalk proposed where it is as opposed to closer to the intersection?
closer to the intersection of Dorset Street and Park Road.
No, westerly by 10, 20 feet to be closer to the two streets.
oh,
We were just trying to keep it out of the pavement, out of the asphalt, the radii. You know, I suppose it could be shifted a little bit closer to the intersection. I mean, it's
And I'm
crossing
not a-
Park Road anyway.
I'm not a pedestrian engineer, but you obviously want it to be in a location where it's easy to see whether you're coming from Dorset Street or you're coming from east and moving west. But my other thing is more of a mental thing of like, I mean, this is, by the time both this development's built out and the one across the street, it's fairly dense. And so mentally, when I'm in a city and I'm in a car, although very few people will be turning right, okay? But mentally, you glance to your right and you expect the pedestrian next to the button to press for the crosswalk. This is not a mid-block crossing. And also by having those large radii, maybe it's for the keep the fire chief happy, but mentally speaking, I think of somebody crossing the street within 5 feet of the corner. So when I look at the crosswalk, I'm like, why isn't it, you know, a scooch to the west? Just mentally, so when you're coming, when you're getting ready to turn onto Park Road, you take a quick glance, you're expecting, if you're looking for a pedestrian, they're within 10 feet of you, not 20 feet away or whatever that distance is.
It kind of goes back to timing too, like Zoe Circle on our project, depending on which one goes in first. And if we need to extend the crosswalk to the sidewalk on the Park Road, we didn't want to impact that future asphalt going on to Zoe Circle. So we were just trying to keep it outside of their proposed improvements. But if it is a concern, we can look at shifting it.
Right. It just, maybe it's something we can flag for DPW to look at or whatever. I'm not an expert in this, but it just looks off. That's all. But just flag it and move on unless somebody else is. Wait, where's Stephanie? Weigh in on this. You're the engineer.
Yeah, I'm on the fence about this too. Because I see what you're saying, Dan, like it does make sense. You expect them to be a lot closer to you.
Yeah.
But also, do you want someone walking through a driveway apron?
Yeah.
Can we require, because it's not, state road and things like that, it's an offshoot, can we require the push button with the flashing LED lights for the crosswalk?
We are proposing pedestrian warning signs with arrows. I don't think currently we're not proposing a solar actuated rapid flashing beacon. But if, that is something the board thinks is necessary, we can look into that and work with Public Works too, moving forward prior to final.
Dan, is there a warrant for that, or is that Dan H? Is that something that like there's a metric for, or is that more like a art than a science?
Yeah, a lot of times, it's would be a requirement from Public Works. The majority of the time, that's where we've seen that. I'm unsure if there is a warrant for that, and if there is, I haven't gone through that. But we can certainly work with Public Works on that.
Okay, are we ready to move on?
So I guess the summary.
Go ahead, Marla.
I was just going to say the summary is work on fine-tuning the crosswalk location and work with Public Works on recommendations for safety.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I add one more thing? I'm sorry to belabor the point, but I'm looking at this density. Why are there such facilitation of cars swooping in off of Park Road into the private drives? Why aren't these more 90-degree intersections as opposed to I must maintain 40 miles an hour swooping into my private road?
So we are intersecting Park Road at 90. There is, a swoop at the beginning of that, but the intersection itself is at 90. Park Road's kind of on a bend there. We're ending up bending the other way too. But the intersection itself is at a 90-degree with Park Road.
No, I get that. That's almost
Yeah.
by definition. I just, whatever. I'll defer to DPW on it, but it just seems odd.
Okay, anything else before we move on? All right, number 6 deals with site distance. Recommendation is that the board require the applicant to demonstrate that site distance standards are met prior to closing the hearing. Dan, thoughts about that?
Yep, so we are showing a site distance on sheet 3 of our plan. Posted speed limit for Park Roads, 25 miles an hour, which requires 280 feet. So we are showing that on the plan. We also did have correspondence with Department of Public Works, and they asked us to look into site distance. We responded to them. We didn't hear back, so we assumed we were fine. But also in Roger Dickinson's traffic impact assessment, he did state that the project has adequate site distance, and BFJ also backed that up in the third-party review. So site distance is not an issue on this project.
Okay. Okay. Marla, does that work for you?
Yeah, I see it on the plans that they have now, so that'll be something that we just look at now that they've
Okay.
submitted them.
Great.
It was on the original submission set too, I believe.
Okay, well, we haven't looked at it, so maybe we
Okay.
missed it, but it's not something that I asked the DPW director to look at, because the last correspondence I had from him was that you should substantiate site systems requirements, and that's
Yep,
I
and-
just took his word for it.
And we responded to him on that as well.
Okay, I don't think I saw that.
Okay, number 7. It's regarding access for service vehicles, and the staff comment says the applicant should address how this concern will be addressed. So Dan, I'm wondering what your thoughts are.
Yep, so we went back and looked at turning movements. Turning movements weren't provided with our preliminary submission, but when we followed up with building height, we also followed up with a turning movement exhibit. For service vehicle, we're showing a 30-foot vehicle, which is, much bigger than a mail truck, on par, maybe a little bit bigger than a large FedEx or UPS truck, garbage truck, which I don't know if Marla could bring that up, or Delilah, but service vehicles are able to pull down to the end of the road, back up in the turnaround, and proceed out of the development. So there is adequate circulation for turning vehicles or service vehicles.
Does that work for you, Marla and board?
I'd like to see the plan that Dan's referring to. Delilah's pulling it up right now.
Okay.
Yep, so on here, you can see we have a vehicle entering private road A on the west, coming down to the end, pulling into that hammerhead or wide turnaround at the end, backing up into the other side and pulling out. Private road B, same thing. They come all the way down to the end, back up into that hammerhead, and they're able to pull out there too.
Okay. Marla?
Yeah, BFJ's comment was about that this is a pain in the neck for trucks that drive there every day. It's
Right.
not like a emergency situation where it's only every once in a while. But if we feel like this pain in the neck is worth it, then that's what it is.
Board, what are your thoughts about the degree to which we should be concerned about pain in the neck for service vehicles? That's a mouthful.
I have a question, just curiosity. I mean, is it a matter of space? If you had a circular endpoint to the cul-de-sac, wouldn't that work a little better for people turning around?
Circular is typically a lot bigger than that to get the turning radius for a cul-de-sac, as opposed to a hammerhead.
Yeah, I think the alternative that BFJ was suggesting is connecting the roads and having, one loop road, as opposed to two dead-end roads.
Yeah, and this was brought up at sketch too,
Right.
and you just have one access point and veer off there. We agree with BFJ that a U-shaped road provides better circulation. I don't think this is a pain in the neck. Cars come in, back out all the time. There's dead end roads, all over the place. So while it may be a little more inconvenient, it's certainly doable to pull in, back out, and leave the development. At Sketch, when we talked about it, there is a pretty steep grade drop on site, like in the vicinity of Unit 5, the existing contours, 428 down by the end of private road B, you have a 410. So that's like 18 feet. So even if you could connect the roads, and due to that grade drop, there'd probably be a good amount of cut through there to do that. You just wouldn't have, or the developer wouldn't have the desired density to make this project feasible, because that connection would also eat up a lot of space. So while it isn't ideal to have that hammerhead, and not as easy as a U-shaped road, it happens all the time. And we don't really feel it's a pain in the neck for service vehicles to have to do that.
And when they U-shape, if I understand what is meant by U-shaped road, wouldn't that result in more impervious surface also? Or not?
Depending on that's hard to say. Depending on the layout, I don't think you'd be able to fit as many units in. So maybe, it's hard to say that it would result in more impervious surface. Just looking at the roads now, they're approximately 300 feet long, between 250 and 300 feet long. I'm not sure that your road would be 500 to 600 feet if it was a U-shape. So maybe comparable, but it's kind of hard to say.
Okay. Can we all live with this?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about a pain in the butt for service vehicles, but they do have to kind of do this every day in a lot of circumstances. I think as long as fire chief is okay with the emergency access vehicles, which won't be used hopefully as often, but it functions for him, I'm okay with the layout.
Anyone have a problem with it? Okay, let's move on. Speaking of the fire chief, to number 8. So the suggestion from Marla was, because the fire chief has not had the opportunity to review the plans, we should probably continue this hearing. Hopefully we can get through the staff comments and then continue it.
Dan, have you brought this project to the fire chief? Because I've tried.
No, we have not. We assumed it was going to be reviewed as part of our preliminary submittal.
Yeah.
So it's
sometimes I only bring it up because sometimes they're more responsive to you guys than they are to us.
Yeah. I mean, we would hate to hold up our final plat submittal on this. I mean, we'll certainly work with the fire chief prior to final plat.
I guess the concern is that if they have a really big problem and your final plat would have to differ substantially from what you have, that's not a final, that's redoing preliminary,
Yeah, and then we would have to, if he had a major concern, we would have to go back to preliminary anyway. We would resubmit preliminary.
Right, but we wouldn't have to rewarn it or anything. So we could get you finished faster if we kept it open. I mean, this is really for your protection. We could get you finished faster if you and I both make an effort to make the fire chief get eyes on this.
Well, I think if we proceeded with final, that would be faster. We would work with the fire chief prior to, and then we wouldn't have to wait for, the continued meeting.
Yeah, but keep in mind that a rewarned meeting, you need to get it in 4 weeks before the meeting, and then we have to warn it. And whereas if we just continued you tonight, we could set that date for, the 2nd April meeting, and hopefully it's kind of a not short conversation. And if it is not a short conversation, we just saved you 4 weeks.
Sure. I mean, we're comfortable with the layout. I think we prefer to go to final, but whatever the board feels best. We are proposing 2 hydrants along each road. There's adequate fire coverage. The fire vehicles will be able to access the site. We don't foresee any issues.
So it sounds like you're
Again,
willing to take that risk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And board members, shall we let them do that? Is that okay?
Well, it's their risk, right?
Right, right. Anyone have a problem with that?
I had a question, not a problem, because, if they want to take the risk, it's okay with me, but the question is this. Just trying to anticipate what the fire chief might say about rear access to these buildings. What is the quality of the rear access? And you got to get between these 2 buildings here, is that the idea? And then what is the surface on which you're going to put a fire? You got a fire behind this building. Well, at the end, can you see my arrow? I guess you can't.
No.
What number building, Frank?
13 and 14.
Okay,
You have a fire right at the juncture, right at the party wall, right? Big fire. How do you get to it?
Yeah, I would assume they would be running a fire hose from the street back to the rear of the building. You're not going to get a service vehicle behind there, but I don't believe that's a requirement that they need to get a service vehicle behind there. But I would defer to the fire chief on that. But I imagine if there was a fire behind those units, they would tap onto the hydrant in the roadway and run the hose behind those units.
Through the separation between the buildings.
yes.
Yeah, or around the other end. I mean, there's a building in the middle. So if there was a fire in that one, they would have to go between the separation between the buildings. But on the end units, they could go around the end, depending on the length of their fire hose, or if they have a water truck there too that they could utilize.
Just a question, as I said,
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Fire chief definitely would have more insight, and that's what we'd be looking to work through with him as well.
Okay. So are we ready to move on? Number 9. And this is the path onto the rec path. Staff recommends that we require the path to be 8 feet wide and asphalt. Is that something you're prepared to do, Dan?
Yep. Yeah, we have no issue with that. We'll
Okay.
add that to our final plat, make that
Okay.
8 feet wide and asphalt. I would say that we prefer that the sidewalk within the Park Road right-of-way be maintained by the city, not the HOA, as it is within the Park Road right-of-way. But I didn't see the letter from the Deputy Director of Operations, so I'm not exactly sure what his comment was, but we would prefer that sidewalk within the city right-of-way be maintained by the city.
His comments were, the applicant is going to maintain the sidewalk on the south side of Park Road, comma, right, question mark? So that's why I didn't put it in, because it wasn't like much of anything to put in. But his position is that that's a weird, disconnected piece of sidewalk for the city to have to maintain, because they're already taking one pass on the other side, and they'd have to come back and take like this weird little short pass. I understand where you're coming from, because it's in the right of way.
Yeah, it's our preference. I would leave it up to the board what they feel is.
I wonder
is right.
how the city would feel, how the DPW would feel about like maintenance in terms of like, repairs and that kind of thing being the city's, but snow plowing maintenance be the HOA's.
Yeah, we'd be open to something like that. They'll be maintaining the internal sidewalks anyway, so we'd be open to that. The city taking responsibility for repairs and maintenance and snow plowing beyond the HOA.
Board, how would you feel if I had that as a to-do item for the applicant to talk to the operations director before final plat about that?
That makes
That's a
sense.
great idea. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to number 10. This is about additional parking on the western roadway. What are your comments about that?
Yeah, so right now we are proposing 4 spaces per unit. That's 2 driveway spaces, 2 garage spaces. We're also proposing 2 parallel spaces on that western road, private road A, and private road B will have on-street parking. So in total, excluding the on-street parking in private road B, we're proposing 58 spaces. Under the 2003 LDRs, you need 1 space, or you need 2 spaces per dwelling unit and 1 space for every 4 dwelling units. So that the total required parking would be 29 spaces. So we're essentially double what's required out there. But more importantly, there really just isn't room for additional parking on private road A. If it was an easy fix that we could add some additional spaces up there, we may, but I don't think it's needed as we are proposing, excess parking with our project. And it would be increasing the impervious area too, if we were to add additional parking.
Thoughts, board?
Personally, I'm fine with it sort of the way it is. In terms of pure parking quantity, he's right. They're overparked in terms of what they need by code, and each unit has 4 spaces. So.
Okay. Anyone else from the board?
Looks good to me, and I don't know, all that pavement would be good for a game of kickball, so.
Yeah. So one question I have, you're saying that on private road B, you're proposing on-street parking for it?
Yep. So
Okay.
originally at Sketch, we had parallel spaces and the road was 20 feet. We increased that road to 26 feet, which allows for on-street parking just on the western side. So it would
Okay.
just be on
Okay.
one side.
Right.
And if we don't have signage, we will include signage with our final plat. No parking on this side of street, on
Okay.
the other side. Yep.
Okay.
Great. Okay. Moving on. This is about the wire served utilities. I need my reading glasses for this. They're not shown on the provided plans. Can they be added for final plat, Dan?
Yeah, so we typically, when we deal with Green Mountain Power and Vermont Gas, we want to have our layout pretty close to being done. That way, if there were changes, Vermont Gas and Green Mountain Power don't need to go back and revise their layouts. So after preliminary, we'll certainly coordinate with Green Mountain Power, Vermont Gas, and get that on the plan for final.
What's your game plan? Are they going to come down the street?
Yep. So, I expect that they're going to come down the street. You'd have electric on one side, gas on the other. It'll be underground. All utilities will be underground. But I expect that they would come down one side or the other side of the street. But it is tight, so we may have to get creative when we're going through that with GMP and Vermont Gas.
Okay.
Have you worked out locations for transformer pads?
No, we haven't. That would be part of our work with Green Mountain Power on coming up with those transformer pad locations.
Okay. And the next comment is related to lighting fixtures and a request that you comply with these.
Yep, we have no issue on comment 12,
Okay.
complying with that.
Okay. Good. Comment number 13. So this is a comment from the city stormwater section requesting a more detailed site plan. The submitted plan does not have enough detail to verify feasibility.
Yep.
If the stormwater treatment system is not feasible, staff considers preliminary plat should not be closed. And that, in addition to that, it needs to be addressed before closing the preliminary plat. So what do you have to offer in terms of that?
Yep. So I believe the stormwater section was asked if the subbasin, does the western subbasin allow flow to the gravel wetland on the east side of the property? Believe they're referring to the basin at the end of private road B. That's the only basin we're proposing. We have some catch basins up top, but either way, the basin, all the catch basins flow to the gravel wetland. So that was shown on the plan. And then stormwater does ask, how will runoff from the roofs of units 13 and 14 be conveyed to the gravel wetland? That's a good question. On preliminary, we didn't show the roof drains leading there, but on final, we will show downspouts connecting to a roof drain system, which will convey the water down to the gravel wetland. So the runoff from those roofs will be conveyed to the gravel wetland via downspouts and a roof drain network.
Okay, is that acceptable to everyone?
I have a question about roof drains and downspouts. That arises because I actually, sorry, a relative from Connecticut who's a very experienced estimator and builder who looked at my lousy
Frank, you're breaking up. Frank,
always break. Well, can you hear me?
now we
Can you
can.
hear me? Okay.
Thanks.
I'm getting a message saying meaning my internet connection is unstable. So if I freeze up, just ignore this and move on without me. My question is, do your roof drains extend out past the edge of the building, or do they end at the corner and go straight down into a downspout? As a matter of design.
If Paul or Peter are on, I would defer to them. I assume that I would think that would stop at the corner of the building and not extend past, but
it's a point of curiosity because my relative by marriage, who's very good at this, disapproves of that design. And when you look at my house, you can see why. You're always dealing with a broken end of the downspout and you're pouring water down. I don't know. I'm just curious whether there's a comment on that from the developer, a design comment.
Well, I think the downspout would discharge a little bit past the building. I don't think the downspout would stop right at the corner. I think it would be, if that's what you're asking, I think that would be conveyed out into the lawn. But here it would be conveyed into an underground storm sewer, basically, which would transport that runoff down to the gravel wetland, at least on units probably 11, 12, 13 and 14, but we'll include that with final.
And they do come down to the corners and then branch out at least 2 feet, 1.5 to 2 feet away from the foundation. And if it's not a good place to discharge, then we usually will divert it into like a little mini 12 by 12 dry well catch basin that we put further in down the lawn. But in this case, like Dan was just saying, we'll be able to divert it and put it into that stone wetland area.
All right, well, what I'm concerned with is that little L shape at the bottom of the downspout, winds up getting, it's a hook-on piece, or it's a piece that fits in. It's not a single piece, right? It gets.
Correct. Yeah, it's a
Removed.
female.
Yeah, well, they have a tendency to get mangled and disconnected.
They do. I see exactly what you're talking about. The HOA, the way we set it up, and the HOAs are typically managed pretty well, tend to maintain them and make sure that they keep an eye on them. But that's something that we can look at with the grading and the elevation, what makes the most sense.
Okay, passing
Okay.
comment.
Thank you, Frank and Dan. Number 14. We need a rendering from the south of the project.
Yeah, I guess I would ask staff if they really mean driving north along Dorset, because above that they're referring to units 9 through 14 and kind of what I believe is the back of those units. I think they may mean, I don't want to put words into staff's mouth, but I think they may mean driving west along Park Road. So I would just seek clarification from staff on that.
No, we meant what we said. Sorry, it was intended to be two separate thoughts.
Okay.
So
So what are you
what
looking
will be
for?
the appearance of this development as you approach it from the south on Dorset Street?
Yeah, so we have a rendering from, we did include a rendering in our submittal, kind of looking south, but looking north along Dorset Street. I believe it's pretty wooded, or there's some vegetation right to the south of the development. As you approach the development, you're going to have those earthen berms with shrubs. So that will be providing some screening for the development. And we have a rendering that we included in our submission that depicts that's it right there. Yeah, we have the rendering of those earthen berms there. So it looked similar to that as you're coming north along Dorset Street too.
What is the surface of the berm in that rendering? That looks unusual.
I thought the same thing. I believe it's going to be grass. I think the surface they're showing there is mulch, but it would be grassed. So that's not completely accurate, that rendering right there.
So are we, Marla, what are your thoughts about the rendering from the south facing as you're driving north?
The purpose of this question was to respond to the board's interest in how these things are well integrated on other similar projects. So, right now we're looking at it from the north and we're looking at the front of the first building there. But coming from the south, we'll be looking at the back of the building. So will that building from the south present just a big blank wall? You're coming up a hill, I believe, though I'm not 100% sure on that.
Are you able to pull up Google Earth, Marla? There's a pretty good view, and there's a good amount of vegetation along that rec path there that will be blocking the south side of that unit in the southwest corner. So it's going to be pretty well screened as you're driving north along Dorset Street. And, as a driver, your direction is going to be looking forward. Once you get past that southern property line, it is going to open up, but there's going to be those berms with vegetation there too.
So is that vegetation that you're referring to, Dan, on this property or on an adjoining property?
An adjoining property.
And so why would we have any assurance that would remain in the future?
You wouldn't. You wouldn't.
Right, because that's a private home, so they could just cut down
Mhm.
their hedge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that hedgerow is more or less on the property line. So they could certainly cut down that hedge. Right now we can propose a little more vegetation tied up against that hedge in the event that it's going to be cut down in the future, possibly.
Well, is vegetation gonna grow when it's being screened by existing vegetation? I guess the
That's a
reason
question for a
staff brought this
landscape
up,
architect. I don't think so.
yeah, I mean, and the reason we brought this up as staff is because the board has asked this question on other similar projects, right? The board has been very
Okay.
interested in seeing what the project looks like as you approach it from the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the existing condition, you're not going to see much. In the future, that could change if that homeowner decides to take down that hedge.
Well, Dan, we can also make the back of this building look like the backs of the units on the Metallist Drive project that those are the backs of those homes facing Dorset Street. So we can make this duplex, even though it's a duplex, make the back of it mimic what you see on Dorset Street right across from the clubhouse, which have the fake dormers over the one side. So it gives it more of a frontage aesthetic of the house.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Of course, the neighbor who's got the hedgerow has little incentive to take it down because he's going to be looking at the ugly back of the house, right?
Good. Very good point.
yeah. Yeah. All right, any other thoughts about this issue before we move on?
So Don, we're talking about units 3 and 4. They're going to do a similar treatment to the backs of them that they did on another property to give it more of a frontage feel to it, so that in the event that that existing hedgerow is removed, when you're coming up from the south, it's going to present more of a front of the house aesthetic look than sort of like your typical rear, because I'm seeing these great renderings and great front elevations, but none of it is what the rear of the buildings look like. So I see where Marla's coming from, and she's right. We have often said, what are you presenting to the public? You know, I understand when it's the back of the building within a development, but when it's coming up a public way, what's the back of that going to look like? So is that what you're talking about, units 3 and 4? You're going to be applying the aesthetic detailing and massing changes that you've done previously?
That's what I was referring to on that one building. Just,
Okay.
and it's not a whole lot. All it is we have to do it over at South Village when the backs are facing the common street areas.
Okay. So I would just like to say, as part of final, can we get an additional rendering like you've included, a whole bunch of nice ones from the south, as if that hedgerow isn't there, showing what that view is going to be like if that hedgerow is gone, with these nice decorative elements added onto it.
I think we can do that.
That would
Okay.
be great. Thanks, Mark, for.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments about that issue? So that takes us to the end of the comments, the staff comments. So, Marla, are we, given that the applicant is willing to take the risk around the fire department's approval of this, are we okay to close? And see them back at final?
This is difficult to frame politely. This feels a little, so I'm just going to say it the way it is framed in my mind, and I apologize for that. It feels a little rushed, and I'm a little concerned that, there's a lot of, yeah, we'll do that, yeah, we'll do that, yeah, we'll do that. But it's 14 homes. we should definitely take public comment. I just want to make sure that this project gets the scrutiny that it needs, but if the board feels like that scrutiny can occur at final, then that's ultimately the board's decision.
I guess one question I would have for you, Marla, is do you have enough information from the information provided and the testimony provided, and I guess the board's, waffling on what we can accept at final and what we sometimes normally want to see at preliminary, to write a decision that would uphold what we're looking for at final?
In other words, another way to put it is, for all the yeah, we'll do that, do you have enough concreteness to make the yeah, we'll do that into a condition of the
Right.
preliminary plat approval?
Exactly.
I think so.
Then no harm, no foul.
Right.
So let's take public comment, and then we'll come back to debating whether we'll close or not.
Okay.
So, are there any members of the public who have comments to offer? And Delilah, do you by any chance see any online?
I don't see any online.
Okay.
I would give it a second.
Yeah. Okay.
We get raised hands in Zoom, right? I don't see any raised hands, and I don't see any
No.
chats.
Laura, I see. We can't hear you. You're muted.
Okay, now,
Tell us your name. Thank you.
thank you. My question has to do.
Tell us your name, Laura.
Oh, I'm
please.
sorry, Laura DiMaroni, and I live down south of the proposed development on Dorset Street.
Okay.
The talk about the property owner to the south of this development and the hedgerow and all of that stuff, it seems to ignore the fact that the house is abandoned. The barn is in the process of falling down. Nobody lives in the house. It was owned by Paul Heald, who has died. There's no way of knowing from what I've heard tonight how anything concrete can be said about that property. It looks as if it's in limbo.
Marla, what are your thoughts about that?
I think that's an excellent point, and I think that the board's direction to not rely on the property to make the project attractive is consistent with Laura's point.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
that was my comment about wanting to see the back of 3 and 4, which are the ones that are directly adjacent to it,
Yeah.
spruced up so that in the event that whole hedgerow is clear cut, the project still is presented aesthetically pleasing to Dorset for people driving up from the south.
Okay. Makes sense to me.
Thank you.
Anything else, Laura?
No, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll mute myself now.
Are there any other public comments? Going once?
I guess I
Okay.
have one more.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
All right. I wasn't here at the very beginning of the meeting, but I did attend the meetings about the proposed development across the street of Park Road. And there's been a lot of discussion there about traffic on Park Road and the potential on that curve and a slopey hill of traffic coming in and out onto Park Road. If you have a minute, could you tell me how that was addressed in terms of this proposed development?
We spent a lot of time talking about that
Okay.
and hearing about that in public comments. Marla, can you take this one?
So generally, the board looked at the alignment of the driveways and considered both tonight and its sketch, probably more so its sketch, some different ideas for ways this could be better, and ultimately concluded that While other ideas exist, this is probably as good or as close to the best that it's going to get.
Okay. The information indicated that the address of this development is two places on Dorset Street, which led me to think that the development would be accessed via Dorset Street. So just because of how it's been referred to as, I think, 1116, 1180 Dorset Street. Is there a reason for that?
So the parcels in question are older parcels that used to be considered on Dorset Street, but the city policy is to have access off smaller roads rather than off main arterials where possible.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Any other public comments? Okay. So board, what are your thoughts? Can we close? Shall we continue?
Well, I guess I have a question for Marla, which is, are there any hanging issues that we can, by making them conditions of the preliminary plat approval?
No, I think my discomfort is that some of them feel like big conditions, but if the board's comfortable, it's okay. Hey, Frank,
I think
sometimes when I have trouble with connection when I'm at home, if I turn off the video, it gets better. We just lost you for a minute, but I got the gist of what you were saying.
I would agree with Frank, and I guess with you, Marla, in that, you know, if it's something that you feel comfortable that you have the information based on the board's direction and comment back from the applicant, that you can craft the conditions to cover everything we've talked about, I'm comfortable closing. But as you point out, some of them are pretty big conditions and big items that are still kind of loose. And I don't want to feel as though we have to, quote unquote, rush final. And typically we do it the opposite, where at preliminary, we continue the application to nail down everything. So final is just dotting our I's and crossing our T's, and is typically a single meeting. I don't want us to feel that sort of obligation if we're leaving all these things open for final.
Thanks, Mark. Other opinions?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Mark, and I do kind of want to see what comes back from the ledge exploration, because I think that could really help give us a better idea on how all this could play out with the grading and the road and the buildings.
And I would have to say, I think I agree with both of you that, you know, let's get some of these things resolved, and then it'll be easier moving into final.
Yeah, I'd like to see the rendering from the south and the changes to the architectural of the building. I'd like to hopefully get you to meet with the fire chief and get that signed off at preliminary. And I'd like to see at least a preliminary, as Stephanie put it, preliminary ledge, removal protection plan that can be finalized at final. But I'd like to see some information given for us at this time. And I think that, those are sort of the big ticket items I'd like to get resolved before we close preliminary.
Okay. So does anyone disagree with that?
No, that's kind of what I was asking.
Okay. So I would entertain a motion to continue the hearing.
To when, though?
Pardon
Marla, when would be a good time to, what's based on availability and scheduling? Because we need a motion to a future meeting.
I could put them on April 19th, but that would bump some other stuff and would mean they'd have to get all those things to me in 2 weeks. So what about the first May meeting? I think that would be a little bit more comfortable for everybody.
What's the
I just
date
need
of
to get
that?
the date really quickly. Because I think the first May meeting might be a Wednesday. Hang on. 2022.
May 3rd or May 4th?
It's May 4th.
It's
That's a
Wednesday, May 4th, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't remember why.
All right, then are we ready for a motion?
We are.
All right, then I make a motion that we continue SC 2203 to May 4th.
I'll second that. Is there any discussion? Okay, all in favor of continuing the hearing to May 4th, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, the motion is carried. Dan, we'll see you back here on May 4th.
Great. Yeah, thank you, guys.
Yep.
Thanks. And I am going to duck out for 2 minutes, and then I'll be back and we'll move up on the agenda.
Right.
Dan, do you want to swear in the
Yep.
applicants for the next one?
Yep, sure. So the next one is final plat application SD-22-05 of O'Brien Farm Road LLC. The next phase of plan for up to 490 dwelling units and non-residential space as allowable in the zoning district. The phase consists of 2 5-story multifamily residential buildings on lots 13 and 15 with a total of 251 dwelling units, 1,219 square feet of commercial space, and associated site improvements 255 Kennedy Drive. Who is here for the applicants?
Evan Langfeld from O'Brien Brothers.
Andrew Gill with O'Brien Brothers.
This is Scott Homestead for Krebs and Lansing Consulting Engineers, civil engineer for the applicant.
Okay, who else?
Jeff Hodson, Wagner Hodson Landscape Architecture.
Roger Dickinson, Lamoureux Dickinson Engineers.
Okay.
Carolyn Orban, Wagner Hodson Landscape Architecture.
All right, I'll pass the baton back to you, Dawn, since you're so good at swearing them in.
Thanks, Dan. Could you please all raise your right hands?
Don, this
one
is
more.
Evan
Is
again. I
Tim?
think we have one other person, our architect.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Tim Smith with BSB Design. We're the architect of design for
Okay,
this project.
thanks, Tim. Okay, all of you, raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under
do.
penalty of perjury?
I do.
Yes.
I do.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, are there any disclosures or conflicts of interest? I will disclose that I own a condo, a townhome in the Hillside development, but I've participated in all of these hearings so far. I don't believe that I am biased. I think I can render an unbiased opinion unless anyone feels otherwise. And are there any others? Okay. Let's go ahead and can you provide us a very brief overview of where you are with this, Evan and Andrew, and then we'll start working our way through the staff comments.
Sure. Well, thank you, first of all. And I just want to say we're excited to finally be before you tonight for the first final plat hearing of our 2 multifamily properties located on lots 13 and 15 at O'Brien Farm. I thought I'd start off with a brief introduction to provide a little bit of background on this project. Much time has gone by since we filed our preliminary plat application on March 12, 2020, and much has changed in the world since then. At O'Brien Brothers, we shut down our offices the following day, and the following Wednesday, we put all of our tools down on our job sites. The only employees that remained in the field were essential workers at our affordable housing, senior living facilities, and multifamily and commercial properties. I'd say most, if not all, of our collective lives changed in some way, shape, or form that week and in the times that we've lived through since. 2 years later, we have adapted and learned to live with COVID, but the world around us has irreparably changed. Professionally has changed many aspects of the way we used to do business, and certainly the way and where our employees work and live. I wouldn't have imagined 2 years ago I'd be speaking in front of the development review board for my basement, but here we are. This is all to say that while 24 months have passed, it feels like a much bigger chasm has occurred from that original submission. But here we are today to present our 2 buildings proposed at final plat, both of which in large part have remained consistent with what we proposed 2 very long years ago. There have certainly been changes, as almost always occurs as a project, particularly a large one like this, proceeds through permitting as drawings progress, as time elapses, as market conditions change, and as ideas that weren't previously contemplated are now included. Changes have undoubtedly been made, but by and large, these buildings are consistent with what was originally proposed, and in most cases have improved over time as we have fleshed out the spaces, changed our unit mix, and added residences. A very positive change in a market that is historically tight and one that was encouraged by this board during master plan. And we've added new amenities that will make these buildings more attractive and vibrant places for our residents to live. We would ask that where changes have taken place, that they be reviewed in the context of whether the change is consequential when looking at the entirety of the project, particularly when other changes have taken place which have clearly improved and also added considerable cost to the project. We believe our project has gotten better over time and also added amenities and design elements that have arisen in response to current market conditions and demand. But most of all, we believe our project is consistent with the design and intent that was first presented by O'Brien Brothers in March 2020, and then conditioned by the Development Review Board at preliminary plat. Yes, there are changes, but that is also the nature of the permitting process from sketch plan to preliminary plat until all the details have been ironed out and conditioned at final plat. We believe our project has gotten better over time, and we look forward to discussing with you at this hearing and future ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. Any other kind of opening comments, or shall we start working our way through staff comments? You
I
ready to
think we
go?
should probably just start forward. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Excuse me.
So on page 3 of the staff report, and maybe this question is directed to you, Marla. There are 3 items listed where you called out things they failed to address, but it's not in red. Are those, of course I've read all this, but do you believe those 3 things are covered in your red comments?
Let me reopen that because it's too small for me to see on the screen. Okay. So yeah, it's those 3, and then if you scroll down a little bit, that other one. They are not addressed elsewhere in the staff comments.
Okay, so should we walk through them?
I think that they're all I think that there's not much for the board to say yet about them until the plans are changed to address them, unless the applicant wanted to talk about them. But I think these largely fall in we'll sort them out without the board's involvement.
Thank you. So let's just start. Go ahead.
We would, there are a few times in the packet where, some of the black text is relevant. But I think for this one, one question that I had was with regard to the 2 parking spaces that are in front of lot 15. If you went back to the site plan that you were at, they're also behind like a fairly large retaining wall and a seat wall and stone patio area. So I guess I just wasn't aware what the parking in the front yard limitation was, if it was behind a structure or if it's behind the building, or, is that wall, a sufficient screen to enable those 2 parking spaces to stay or not? And then I guess a follow-up is if it's not, I think there's an exception for handicap spaces. And so we might move one of those down there in order to keep the parking count the same.
Mm-hmm. It is specifically to the side or rear of buildings, not to structures.
So like a wall or something doesn't, if we were to make that somehow like a 4-foot wall or fence of some sort, it doesn't matter.
Without going through a lot of convolutions and having it become like a major portion of your time tonight, I would say you're better off just putting your handicap parking up there.
Okay.
I'd be happy to talk about it with you. I think it's a rabbit hole. If you want to go down it with the board, you're eating up a lot of time that could be spent on more productive stuff.
No, I think we can probably flip one of those handicap spaces on the end down there, and we'll have to ask Tim about it, but let's table that for now.
Okay, thanks. All right, comment number 1. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to fully address the conditions of the preliminary plat approval before closing the hearing.
Yeah, to that point, I mean, I think, some of them are self-explanatory. Potentially, I think the third point regarding the parking garage screening, I'm sure that we'll discuss that more in the bulk of the comments, as well as the landscaping in front of the building 15 on Kennedy Drive. The lighting plan is easy. The parking spaces are easy. The other two, I think, hopefully we can discuss a bit more as we go through and sort of get more of an understanding in terms of what you'd like to see.
Okay,
That
let's
would be
just
our comment there.
move ahead. Thanks, Andrew. Number 2, this is related to increasing the side setback to 10 feet. Tell us what your thoughts are about this, please.
Sure. Well, so this is sort of a, it seems like a minor thing, but we aren't currently proposing to move the property lines of the project since final plat. I think that the waiver is something that the board technically is allowed to grant. And so I think our inclination is to request that the waiver be issued for the 7.5-foot setback. We control the lot 17 land. It's hosting parking for this project. So I think, between owning both sides of the lot line and sort of having parking for this project permitted on the adjacent lot, that there's sort of a decent amount of information there to understand that the waiver isn't going to cause an undue impact to the neighboring property. And so, just to sort of avoid the movement of the lot line and all of the sort of undulations that would be required by that, whether it be expanding the master plan via a different application or just, it's going to subtract land from other PUDs that you've reviewed previously, like the Eastview PUD. It's going to add land to this. It's going to alter all of the coverage for the development. And that's not to say that we can't do all of that. It's just to say that with us controlling both sides of the lot, we felt that it would make sense to just ask the board to consider issuing the waiver.
And I think just to add to that, we've also spent a fair bit of time with the board going over the conceptual plan for the balance of the property. And so there is some concept of what is going to the north of that on the next lot.
Okay. Board members, what are your thoughts about that? And Marla, do you have anything to add?
I did look back at the Eastview plans in writing this, and I thought that the Eastview plans were, this was an area where there was not a concept provided. It was just a blank, unless I was looking at the wrong sheet. So, and actually, I see how you read it the way you're reading it, because I didn't write it very clearly. But when I wrote this, I was thinking not to move the lot line, but to reduce the building a little bit in that location. So to actually move the building away, not move the lot line away from the building. But,
Shrink the building.
right. But I didn't write it that way. I wrote it in a neutral way.
Shrinking the building obviously has a lot of consequences to go along with that. So, we would definitely request that we not really consider that.
And it's certainly moving the lot line would be our preferred alternative over altering the length of the building.
Board members, what are your thoughts?
Where is the side yard? Where is the impact that we're talking about? Can
A marker would be helpful.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. If you guys wanted to zoom in, so on the right side of the screen, just below where it says future gravel wetland, there is a corner of the building and you can see the lot line just below it. I don't have control of the screen, but if you zoom in on that, basically it's on building 15, it's the front right corner.
And what is the issue with it, Andrew?
So the setback is, there you go. So like,
there you go.
You can see the bike parking in the basement level there shown in the upper right corner, and it's the setback right there. So that's a 7.5 feet from the property line instead of the minimum 10.
Okay.
So it's a 2.5 foot discrepancy.
And is that, okay, is that purple line the 7.5 feet, or is it right at the corner? Is that whole length of the building 7.5 feet?
I believe that it jogs in where that purple line is now. So I think the issue is in the back corner, not the front.
It's less than 10 for that whole length, though. It's like, it varies, you're right, but it's less than 10 for the whole length.
Okay.
So do we have the authority to waive this, Marla? I forget what
you do.
report
Yeah.
said.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a PUD.
Yeah. Okay.
So what is the practical argument against not waiving it, I guess?
That there's no development plan for the adjoining parcel, so it may create an unpleasant situation on the adjoining parcel because we just don't know what they wanted. I mean, we know they want to do some sort of commercial development, and that's all we know.
So here's something. Could we say that? Can we condition that since they're in control of the whole development? Can we condition it that whatever goes on the adjacent parcel has to maintain 20 feet between buildings?
No, it's a separate master plan, or separate PUD.
Okay.
I see that sidewalk is there, though. I guess sidewalks are certainly, I don't know.
We have been working more on that parcel now, and there's really no building anywhere near that property line. I can say that.
Yeah, I mean, we could as a supplement here, we could provide you guys with the updated conceptual plan for that area. Going to be submitting our Eastview final plat in the next couple of weeks anyway, so you're going to have it.
I mean, I'm more comfortable with if there's some way to condition or see something which shows that there's going to be minimum 20 feet between the buildings, because there's clearly, from a setback standpoint, there's no reason to need 10 feet there given the site conditions, other than what might go on in the future. And so I guess I'm reasonably comfortable with it, but I'd like some assurance that we're not going to see another building, right at 10 feet.
I think Marla makes a good point about the sidewalk being there. I mean, that's a permanent sidewalk. There's nothing temporary about it.
That is true. We cannot approve a site plan modification if a site plan change came in asking for that sidewalk to be moved to allow for a building to go in right at 10 feet. Isn't that correct, Marla?
Yep.
So I'm fine with that then. We wouldn't approve a change to the sidewalk location.
Okay, so I need to make a note to myself to, in that decision, really make it clear that sidewalk shall remain as a.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I can live with that.
If they wanted to move the sidewalk, they'd have to make sure that it keeps the building 20 feet away, you know what I mean? But I'd prefer just leave the sidewalk not to be, adjusted.
We do have I think that's a good point though, because we do have a separate conditional use application for lot 17 in currently.
Right.
So, and I think that those are going to issue simultaneous with this permit. So you could probably include all those conditions on the lot 17 permit.
Yep.
Is there anyone on the board who cannot live with this? Okay, I think we're good.
Well, wait a minute, if we're granting a waiver, we have to grant the waiver, right?
Yeah, but you don't
Was
have to
that-
vote on it
was
now.
that-
You'll just write it in
Yeah.
write it into the decision.
Okay.
Okay, let's see, let's move on to comment number 3. Okay, page 7. These are DPW comments and calling for a technical review of the traffic study and a recommendation that this be continued until the technical review is complete. And I think, I mean, just going into this, I think we end at 10, so we have an hour left, just over an hour left. It's probably likely we're going to be continuing this anyways. It's a big project. So what do you need from the board, Marla, in terms of the traffic study, the technical review of the traffic study?
If the board agrees with staff and the director and BFJ's recommendation to invoke a technical study, we do need to do a vote.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Go
make
ahead.
a motion that we invoke technical review for the traffic study for lots 13 and 15.
Second.
Could we have just a discussion on this point? I just was a bit confused by the sort of the scope of the review.
So this would be the time to have a discussion because it's been seconded. So
Sure.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Well, so if you look at the paragraph that is on the screen, the technical review is being requested to review the driveway locations, a pedestrian crossing, which was required by the board in the permit that issued just a couple of days ago, as well as a review of curb cuts that were reviewed extensively at the preliminary plat level and which haven't moved. You know, the curb cuts into the project are related to the locations of the buildings, the architecture of the buildings, and the entire site plan that's at final plat. They were reviewed by the previous director of Public Works, who didn't have any concern with them. I think that there's another issue raised where the technical review is being requested because it's been said that we have not indicated that a traffic signal and pedestrian crossing is warranted. But our traffic study specifically does say that a traffic signal and crosswalk is warranted. Our application says that we'll be building the crosswalk and the traffic signal, both of which were approved in the permit SD 2125 that issued on March 8th, just a few days ago, that you guys signed. So it's a little bit confusing, I think, what exactly we're having a third-party traffic engineer review. You know, the Summit multifamily project that you guys had us in here for a couple of weeks ago, we updated the entire traffic study. All of the intersection analyses and capacity analyses were run for the full build out of the master plan, which included these units. At that point in time, the director of Public Works didn't feel the need to invoke a technical review of any of those conclusions. And the crosswalk is particularly concerning because the crosswalk was required by the director of Public Works in the exact location that is now being proposed and where we're invoking a third-party review to look at whether that crosswalk is warranted.
Andrew,
So just
I think
on
that
March,
you're not actually addressing the condition of that lot 10 and 11 final plat with the pedestrian crossing location. I think that that's the gist of that comment. But sorry to interrupt your flow.
well, so I guess I think maybe we just wanted to get a little bit of clarification in terms of, you know, the permit said that we'll put a crosswalk on the road in a specific location, reviewed by the administrative officer prior to issuance of a zoning permit, which we intend to do. The road network was approved, including the curb cuts to this project via a permit that issued 7 days ago. And so I think we're just a little bit trying to figure out, you know, what exactly is it that we're reviewing? You know, and if the third-party review is meant to look at the intersection capacity analyses of the traffic study to prove out that there's sufficient capacity in the roadways and at the adjacent intersections, we're happy to have that review done. And I think Roger's work stands for itself. He's never been wrong yet. But I think reviewing the crosswalk and curb cut locations are what we're sort of looking for a little more clarity on.
Marla.
So we're in a funny position right now, as the board knows. Our director of public works, our previous director of public works was a traffic engineer. Our current director of public works is a environmental scientist, stormwater expert. And so we have contracted with BFJ to do the role that our former director would have done, which is a sort of high level, quick, no more than 2 hours review of traffic related issues for projects that have traffic. BFJ, in their quick 2-hour review, said what it says in the paragraph immediately before the red. The initial review on March 4th identified discrepancies between the applicant's trip generation and what's calculated in the ITE. Our current director, in conjunction with the director of, the operations, what's Adam's title? Anyway, Adam. Looked at the sort of not the driveway locations, but the way that the lanes and where the choice was to start the lanes, and how that driveway comes out after the lane widening has already started, and said, this looks weird. Have we looked at this in great detail? And so those are the two things that BFJ felt like that they needed more time than our sort of like high level replacement for Justin kind of review. And Andrew's comment about the pedestrian crossing, they submitted this application before the final plat decision was issued. So they were unable, and I think that this is, anyway, they were unable to incorporate the conditions of that approval that said, move the pedestrian crossing slightly. So the pedestrian crossing is not what BFJ would be looking at. BFJ would be looking at the way the widening is happening and the trip generation.
Andrew, do you have anything to?
I think that, what I would say is that the curb cuts for this project were reviewed at preliminary plat. And there are extensive comments here regarding sticking to preliminary plat. And I can't think of anything more integral to this project than the location of the curb cut. So while I appreciate that there's a new director of public works, the old director of public works approved these locations and they haven't moved. And it is a very big risk to the viability of the project to sort of open that again at this stage. I don't think that there's any problem, and maybe Roger could speak to whether he feels that that's even a concern from his perspective as a professional traffic engineer. I'm not sure that there's a risk there, but I would, ask for some consideration to be given to those locations that were confirmed previously.
And again, we're not talking about the location of the curb cut. We're talking about when the widening into 3 lanes starts relative to the curb cut.
So I don't know, Roger, do you have any thoughts on that you could share just while we're having the conversation?
Okay. So the widening from 2 lanes to 3 lanes begins, and there's a bit of a taper in the width of the road. And I presume the entrance, the curb cut, the entrance to the parking beneath the building is the issue here. I professionally don't see that as a problem. I would certainly welcome BFJ's input or opinion, and we can. But I just don't see that as an issue. The full 2 exiting lanes begins to the north after that little bend in the roadway. And that's where the stacking will occur primarily.
So if that's the case, then maybe there's no issue with having another person look at it. I think, we maybe misunderstood the comment a little bit to be the actual turnoff. So if it's something that could be resolved, with a slight adjustment of the road curvature, that would seem to make sense.
So we're in the discussion, we're having a discussion. Go ahead.
Although I would also add that the roadway as configured here was just approved via the permit for ST 2125, and our plan is to construct that road prior to the construction of lot 13 and lot 15 as soon as this spring. And so, there is that.
So we're in the discussion, having a discussion after a motion was made and seconded. What other comments do board members have or questions before we take a vote on whether to invoke a traffic study review? Hello.
I don't see any others. I think just having another.
Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, I was just going to say, I don't have any need to have any further discussion. I think, Andrew's comments are valid, but I think having another set of eyes take a look at it, given the circumstances within the city, is valid.
Okay. Anyone have anything else to add before we take a vote?
Yeah, to the extent that we approve, a little consistency here. We just, in another context, had a discussion about being consistent with what was approved or required in a preliminary plat. And Andrew raised the point that.
Frank, you're breaking up. Frank? We can't hear you.
Try turning off your video, Frank. Sometimes that just reduces the bandwidth that you're using.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Not very well.
Did you switch to Burlington Telecom?
Skip, no, it's Comcast, but skip me because I am a little concerned about Andrew's point about things that were approved at preliminary plat not being subject to being revisited at this stage, at this point.
So just for clarification, to be clear, are you agreeing with Andrew, Frank?
Well, yeah, partially.
Okay, all right.
About things that were approved at preliminary.
Now you're breaking up again, sorry.
I think that, based on Roger's perspective, and I think a little bit more understanding of what the comment was actually related to, I don't think we necessarily object to this. I think that the other concern, though, is that what do you do with a permit that was just approved when we're now having a second set of eyes at it and we have an existing permit?
Marla, how would you respond to that?
Well, if BFJ, thinks that the design of the road is not, I guess we'd have to see what the results are. We would certainly honor the previous approval and try to find the best solution. And if that means kind of a handshake agreement with the applicant that this permit is going to modify that in some way, and we're telling you that now, so go ahead and start your construction in that way. It might get I think we can handle it. It's
okay.
No worse than what we've handled.
Marla, just real quick, do you have any sense of what the turnaround time would be for them to take a look at this?
Oh gosh, they were ready to do it last Friday.
Okay, I just don't think it's that big of an issue now that we have a better understanding of it. If it gives the city a little bit more confidence, I think think we're okay with it.
Yeah, they were
Okay,
super
thanks,
excited
Evan.
to jump on it, so.
So all in favor of the motion to invoke a technical study of traffic, say aye.
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 Opposed? No, the motion is carried. Okay, great. Let's move on to question comment number 4. And this is about roof space. And whether the space dedicated to the elevated ceiling for the space below would be better served as additional usable roof space. Andrew, what are your thoughts about this question or this comment?
Sure. So we had submitted to you guys like some visuals, side-by-side comparisons and things like that earlier in the day. Perfect. And we had a slide about this. It was, I believe, 24, slide 24. It has the 2 different configurations. Perfect. So, you know, I can sort of just give a high level overview. I think, you know, comment 4 and 5 in particular, I believe have sort of talked about the, you know, the overall exterior amenities and landscaping. The roof deck was one feature. There are some at-grade features that were discussed. And, you know, in the process of the final plat, we've definitely sort of finalized the amenity features. I think, you know, we went from a conceptual rendering, a hand-drawn sketch on the left to a full CAD drawing on the right. The project has, you know, evolved over the past couple of years, but all of the things that are happening have a reason. So here, as the staff comment pointed out, the roof deck was adjusted. So there were a couple adjustments made, and you can see on the image on the left that the wings of the building used to extend a lot further into the U of the courtyard. And we decided that, you know, that wasn't ideal because it was going to block a lot of sun and western light from getting in. We reconfigured the sort of wings of the building. We expanded those areas. And then in an effort to sort of enhance an amenity, which was the gym space for the units, we put a 2nd-story vaulted ceiling in the gym so that you could have rope climb stations and wall ball stations and potentially even a rock climbing wall of some sort for the tenants to use. And that had the result of sort of intruding into the rooftop amenity above. So you can see that in the box that's on the right-hand side. And I can let the landscape architects are on the call, and I think they can sort of speak to how we've used it and sort of how they feel the amenity is playing out, but we feel really good about it.
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the things we felt like it's such a large roof area that we wanted to have the opportunity to kind of create outdoor rooms, you know, divided by architecture and planters and things so that, you know, a lot of different groups of residents could use it at the same time and not feel like they're kind of on display, you know, everywhere else. So there's, you know, we've kind of created these little outdoor kitchens, and the extended roof of the gymnasium actually created an opportunity to kind of define space. You know, we have kind of in the center, we have 2 kind of grilling stations with tables and chairs. The gymnasium roof provides the opportunity, if we want to put an awning, you know, building mounted, that could cover these areas. Off to the right, it kind of creates this outdoor living room. So we have a TV mounted to the building, the gymnasium roof. You know, so people one group could meet over there and hang out and watch, you know, a football game or something. So we kind of welcomed the introduction of this roof extending up because it really helped us kind of partition and divide up the space rather than just having a big wide open roof space.
I have to be honest, when I saw this, I thought it would create a little more cozy spaces. It would divide it up.
Yeah.
So I can see where you're coming from, and I had that same thought. I'm just glad we're not talking about a pool anymore, but
yeah.
Us too.
Any other comments from the board about this space and the comment?
I think
Can we-
it's pretty
can we-
functional and nicely laid out.
Okay. Marla, I think that it sounds like we're gonna support their design.
Okay.
Unless anyone disagrees. Okay. And then number 5 is a comment. It seems that between preliminary or sketch and preliminary and now, there have been some changes in the amenities outdoors. And you spoke to what can happen over time, Evan, but I'm wondering what other comments you might have about staff comment number 5.
So this comment essentially is dealing with 2 separate open spaces. So there were essentially, I'm trying to think, 5 potentially areas on the site that we had conceptual landscape renderings for initially. One was the 4-way intersection. One was the sort of leasing office pavilion area below the roof deck and the roof deck. And then you had 3 areas on lot 15, this food truck parking area, a sort of patio in the front of the building, and then a boardwalk feature along the front facade of building 15 that we had originally contemplated. And so this comment's dealing with 2 of those areas. I think the comment mentions viewing things in context. I think that's important. Overall, we made improvements in other areas that aren't noted, where the sort of removal of the deck on the front of lot 15 is certainly a real commentary. We also expanded the size of the terrace at lot 13, and we included a cafe, which you guys approved the neighborhood commercial use for at the last hearing that wasn't included at preliminary plat. And so, there's been gives and takes in the project. A little bit more information, I think, on the deck on the front of lot 15. We have in our original submission, and I think that I had a slide in the packet about it. We had thought that the front of lot 15 was going to be half underground. And so there wasn't going to be a full height door coming out of that and heading in, toward Kennedy Drive. And so when you look at that deck, you can see how the sort of deck is not allowing for access from underneath the deck, sort of out to the walking path. And as we sort of got into the grading, it turned out that deck would have had to be 10 feet in the air, with a full height ceiling and door into the parking garage level underneath, which just made the deck much less appealing to be that sort of high off the ground. And then, you had all kinds of access issues with ramps for ADA access and how this thing was kind of sticking out so far. And so we sort of reworked that design to allow for this sort of more quasi-public, sort of park area. And I think that was sort of where we headed in this direction. It was sort of a change to the topography and the way that we thought made the most sense to use the space. But why don't we let, maybe Jeff wants to speak to sort of the design of these.
Yeah, I mean, this was also, responding to changes in the architecture, and also we had a more developed stormwater system that took up a lot more space than we originally thought it would. So we were actually able to just provide an at-grade sidewalk along the face of the building. I guess that's the west face. So we didn't really need to do the raised boardwalk like we thought we had to before. We did still provide kind of a picnic area. It's just more of an area kind of on the walkway out to Kennedy. And I think it helps too, Andrew, if they look at the building elevations for this area, because I think that kind of explains it better.
there's the shot where I sort of was conveying how it used to be underground. So you can see how there's a full height door there instead of that sort of weird intersection of the grade. Are you talking about the architectural elevations?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I believe those are, I think that's on slide 9, 8 or 9. Okay, let's try the next one. 9. There you go. Is that what you're looking for, Jeff?
Yeah, so you can see, we were providing this elevated deck up at the main floor, but it just became, like accessibility and traversing from the grade of the ground below up to that deck, and it just became kind of a real challenge and took up a lot of space, and there was a ton of ramping and things. So we decided that it would just be better to have an at-grade area for people to kind of picnic and hang out, rather than trying to come out of the upper level and work your way down.
So I have a question, and I hesitate to bring this up, but when we were talking about the rooftop, the outdoor kitchens and whatever, will that amenity be available to only the people in that building or to everyone in the 6 buildings?
That rooftop courtyard is sized, and it will only be available to lots 13 and 15 because of the ownership structure, because of the financing required.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So that's why, while there's a decent amount of space up there, what we've also tried to do is provide a commensurate amount of outside amenities for all of the buildings, but then also have indoor amenities that are specific to the buildings.
Okay, thank you. So going back to, go ahead.
Well, so I think in the other area, I just want to point out that while we're on this slide, that there was some feedback about the architecture for the central tower on this, and we're definitely open to that conversation, while we're looking at it. So, we understand that the deck did add some architectural interest here, and we're certainly looking to enhance that ground floor entry, carry the tower down like it does on the right, add some storefront, and make that into a nicer entry. I think that was just an oversight. But I think if you go back in the slide to, I think it'd be slide 31, you can sort of see the rendering here. And we've also talked today about, the potential to enlarge this, the sort of seating area with the seat wall and the 2 tables that you see. I think there is some space to make that a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
And we talked about that.
Yeah, and I think, it was maybe an oversight. We meant to have grills built in down there. So I think that could be added in as well.
This is Frank. I have a comment. If you could go back to the deck a little bit. I don't know if we have to see it because I think everybody's seen it. It's obviously a nice architectural feature. Is there any reason for the removal of that deck other than cost? Any practical reason, any safety reason, anything other than cost for removal of that deck?
Well, yes. So like, as we were explaining, the deck in the previous iteration was off of a community room. So it would have had a sort of more of a use than it does currently off of a WeWork area, home office area. This architectural rendering, right? So this architectural rendering was not accurate to the grading conditions as we understood them at the time. As it turns out, it was correct. But if you look at the image that we had shown previously, which I think is slide 28, the grading plan very much had this as an at-grade deck, not something elevated 10 feet in the air. And then the challenge that was presented when we discovered that it was 10 feet in the air is that there needs to be handicap access off of the deck down to grade. And then for any interlevels between the deck. And it just became a whole bunch of ramps and complication and challenges. And so we thought that it would be best served with an at-grade facility that was accessible to everybody. And the architecture could certainly be remedied.
Well, you could say the architecture would certainly be remedied, but have you presented a remedy? I mean, it sounds to me like the answer to the question, is there anything other than cost? The answer is no. It costs too much money to put in all those ramps.
Can I add a quick comment on that? I will say, as these projects are wont to do, the stormwater design did grow in this area. And the deck, as was previously shown in the concept sketches, was extending well out into the stormwater treatment area. And I think at the very, very least, it would have had to been trimmed back considerably in order to provide, access, to the stormwater areas for maintenance and just for treatment of the volumes that we have here. So,
and just to add to that, Frank, I actually think that there is an aesthetic concern that is not related to cost, which is, putting in all those ramps, I don't think really adds to the aesthetic of it. And I think even in its original iteration, it had some problems with the design because you're essentially creating this deck right outside people's bedroom windows. And, I'll be honest, I was never a huge fan of it. It was one of the reasons why it hit the cutting room floor. It just never really made a lot of sense. What we were trying to do was create something of interest out there. And I think we've achieved that to some degree, but I think to Andrew's comment that it can be improved or remedied, if there are suggestions from the development review board or staff as to, how they would like to see, more grates, more kind of brick detail there, we're happy to do so. And there's also a decent amount of land. It wasn't just a cost thing. In the grand scheme of these buildings, that deck is not a huge factor in the cost. Not saying it's nothing, but it wasn't a huge factor.
Yeah, I think also, the ease of accessibility, it's much easier for residents to go down the elevator to the garage level and exit to use these areas than, trying to put in ramps wherever we can fit them. And, like Scott said, the stormwater area would basically make that whole deck on the left side, you couldn't even build it.
So with the ramps, I think it makes sense to me that ramps take up space, right? So it would be space that wouldn't be otherwise used for open space or common space that could be used by residents. But our original comment here was, it's just smaller and you have more units with less outdoor space. So if I don't know that the board is necessarily settled in their minds on this, but if we were to assume that an at-grade feature was better, can it be brought back up to be the size that it was previously proposed?
I think so. Yeah.
Maybe not the 100% the exact footage, but we did look at today that we could enlarge the size of it, and I think that's a valid point, and we certainly can propose an alternative that expands the size. In the context of the comment, I think it's worth pointing out that for the reductions in these areas, there have been increases in other areas. There's been a substantial increase in the interior amenity spaces in the two buildings to accommodate for the additional units. And so we have invested, a significant amount of effort in ensuring that the buildings are properly amenitized. And we can go through those changes as well.
Yeah, one other comment that came up earlier was a comment about grills in that location. And while I understand it's an outdoor space, I'm not sure it's the best place to be out there grilling. And if we're going to add grills, I'd probably prefer to have them over by the food court, as there is a nice kind of pavilion over there. This area, I think, while it is an amenity space for the residents, I also think it's kind of a nice place for people that are walking down the street on the sidewalk, community rec path, for them to pause and sit on benches, as opposed to, bringing your hot dogs and hamburgers over and grilling them at the new apartment building that went up. It just seems like it's a very different setting than sort of a private place to grill with your friends if you're a resident of the building.
And we can look at that on
there that would animate it.
slide 26 has the other half of this comment on it. It's probably worth turning to. Right. So we talked about this a little bit prior to the hearing as well. And so, what we had discussed was the potential to elongate the patio a little bit toward the parking garage driveway and add the grills back into that sort of wider space.
Gotta love the food truck. I love that.
I think the concern with, the changes to this, I mean, maybe Jeff, can you just talk about sort of, I think there's a limit to how far we can push that to keep those trees, the 4 trees that are there alive, which are intentional.
Yeah, I mean, we also, this was also an area that changed a little bit when we got into the fine grading of this area. Scott and I were kind of trying to work out, there's kind of, when you drive in off of Two Brothers, you go up kind of a slope, and we wanted this whole area to be kind of level and be kind of a threshold that is adjacent to the leasing office, also a level area for a food truck to pull up. And we wanted to provide more shade, from the west. So we put trees around the west and the south, thinking that, when this would be used would be mid to late afternoon, and, would provide a little bit more shade and separation from the entry drive to the garage below. So it's really just responding to refinement of the grading and the site plan and everything that has to kind of work together.
So at this point, do any members of the board have any concerns, or are you satisfied that the plan is presented for final plat works?
Well, the driver of all these changes is a desire for 30 more units, right?
No, this area didn't change at all as far as the building. I mean, we had the same space to work with.
Yeah, I think there's a misunderstanding of what happened when we gained units, because the buildings didn't really grow at all. We just came up with a different unit mix that worked better and was actually more sought after by the market. It wasn't that we expanded the building with the green space or the amenity space.
We also didn't expand the parking.
Building.
The parking
You
lots
divided
were
the pie
same.
differently.
Exactly. And
Yeah, right.
There were more 1-bedroom units and studio units in the current plans than there were at preliminary plat. And that's why there are more units in the buildings, not because the buildings are enlarged in any appreciable manner. They may be a foot or two bigger, here and there. But that was the intention of the first slide in the packet, was to show the 2 site plans side by side, which are very much, in line with each other.
Okay.
And to the point, though, to your question, Don, I think we are acknowledging that we need to adjust these plans a little bit. And so I think we would submit an updated plan for the front of lot 15, as well as an updated plan for this area with the barbecue grills added back in, and an expansion of the size to accommodate the requests in this comment.
Great. Now, are the grills going to be gas grills or charcoal?
They would be gas and built in
Okay.
to the wall.
Okay, good, thanks. Board, any comments before we move on?
No, I'm comfortable with the proposed technical layouts from the preliminary conceptual ones.
Okay. And Dan, Quinn, are you all with us still?
I'm good with it. Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, good. All right, let's move on to comment number 6, the deficiencies in the lighting plan that need to be addressed. What are your thoughts about that, Andrew?
So we had provided an analysis which looked just at the statistical area of the parking lot. There's a limit of like 3 foot candles per whatever it is.
Yep.
on the site. We looked at the parking lot exclusively, which is where all of the lights are, and it was at 1.2, not 3. So we're happy to expand it. We'll correct the plan. We'll expand the statistical area to the whole site. But we're confident it will comply because it complied on a smaller area with more lighting.
Andrew, I think that when I
And-
looked at this, I saw one that showed like the storm pond. I didn't see one that showed just the parking areas. I saw the opposite. It was like too spread out. It showed like
Yeah,
the storm ponds.
He had numbers all over the place, but then in the little chart at the right, he had like identified areas that he didn't mark on the plan.
Okay, maybe that plan just needs to do a little cleanup then.
Exactly. We'll get that thing tuned up and resubmit it.
All right.
And we'll also swap out the fixture with the uplight, FD1 or whatever it was.
Thank you.
I'll clarify that.
Okay, moving on to comment number 7. I'm going to read this one. Staff recommends the board require the applicant to modify the plans to provide the features specifically called out at preliminary plat above, as well as to modify the buildings to be consistent with those represented at preliminary plat in order to demonstrate compliance with these criteria. Andrew.
Well, there's quite a bit in this comment, to sort of look at. And I think, if you could scroll up a little bit, I think there's a list of some sort of changes and stuff that had occurred in the plans as well. And we can go through those, I think, one by one. They're not, I think overall, this sort of comes down to, are we true to what we represented as the concept at preliminary plat? And have we, endeavored to achieve the concept in a way that the board is comfortable with? We feel really strongly that we have. I think that you can look at the particular things that are noted here. A reduction in glazing is one that's mentioned. We had our architect who's on the call look at that. I think the reduction in glazing was about 2% on building 15, and it was about 20 square feet or 0.001% on building 13. So there is a reduction in glazing, but it is pretty minor in the overall scheme of the size of the buildings. The sliding doors are still in the plan. They're not triple sliders.
Just so it's on the record as the proper amounts, it was 0.13% on lot 13 and 2.39% on lot 15. So those are the amounts that we're actually talking about here.
I think, we can go through the list if the board wants to go through the list. We can talk about each individual element. I think there's a lot up there. There's certainly a lot of design choices that we made from, mentioned here, from the type of cornice treatment to the type of window header. The architect is on the call. What I can say is that those choices were very much intentional. They were for the design of the building. They were made by the architect in consult with the ownership team. They were always made with the intent of keeping the buildings in line with what we proposed. So I think maybe, we had given some sort of side-by-side comparisons for architecture in the slides, and maybe it makes sense to just flip through those in the packet that we'd submitted, starting with, I guess it's number 6, page 6.
All right, just a sec.
And Tim, the architect, is on the call and can answer questions, with regard to specifics, if those are out there. But I think, what you can see in looking at this, there's 2 different softwares. One was, I think, SketchUp, and the other one is Revit. So there's sort of a difference built into how they model and how they show. But I think in looking at this and then looking at the next slide, you can sort of see that we've remained pretty true to the character of the architecture. The Juliet balconies are still there. They're double doors instead of triples. The stair towers are there. You can see it at the right-hand side of the plan. We actually added one that wasn't there previously. The glazing along the storefront is there. There's a lot that we've talked about with the parking garage screening and glazing. So as part of the sort of refining of the project, we discovered that the parking garages really want to be tempered. So they don't want to be open to the outdoors because of the sort of implications of needing to heat all of the pipes and all of the sprinkler pipes and mechanical systems that are in those floors, you know, unit bathroom lines and sort of exposure for having frozen pipes in tenants' units. And so what happened was the openings to the garage got closed off. And there was a lot of concern, you know, with how we were going to cover and screen the cars and how we were going to block the light pollution. And we just thought that screening them, you know, enclosing them was a good solution. And we recognized the finding about the metal screens and the decorative grates. And so we've simply put those decorative grates back in the plan on top of the brick. You know, so you won't be able to see through them to cars, but they're still there sort of as a way to break up the facade. Similarly, we've used these brick insets that are called out on the plans, which essentially is a square where the brick is running in a different direction, you know, where a window might, you know, to kind of give it a look or a texture that's a bit different. And we've really, you know, we've tried to preserve the towers at the corners. If you flip through, you know, to the next slide, you can see, you know, sort of different elevations and how they've, you know, maintained. We talked about 15 already, but certainly we're looking at, and we will provide you with an updated elevation.
I was going to zoom into what you're talking
there.
about with the garages. I guess this is not probably as good as the one that was originally submitted in terms of the way it looks.
The application, the package elevations are high res. So like page 36 and 37, yeah.
Oh, too far.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one isn't as... Oops, sorry. Oh dear, come back.
So our package doesn't have these comparison, preliminary and final, just the proposed?
Right.
Okay.
So there's these decorative screens glued on.
Yep.
I want to say, oh, you know what? I know where I put it. I put all of the building 13 stuff together, including the floor plans, and then I put all the building 15 stuff together. So one more. So this is what faces Kennedy Drive, right? And so this, you got to think about this one. This is split into two pieces. The right-hand side is the right-hand side of the building. This is a match line on the left. It continues over here, and this is the far left-hand side of the building.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at, you know, this big blank wall. We're looking at the change from having sills and headers on the windows. We're looking at this being a frame thing and this being a brick thing. Compared to as they were showing. You know, these windows had headers. They were groups of 3. They had big, more sort of massive cornices. And then these were actual openings and down at the bottom.
So again, on the windows and on the cornices, those were design choices. They were aesthetic choices, thoughtfully made aesthetic choices. And I get that, you know, it's subjective to someone that was to take it a little bit more of a modern design. And the architect thought it worked better this way, and we agreed with them. But yeah, the garage, you know, Andrew explained that before, that there are no openings now. So it is a change there.
Have you talked to the fire chief about the garage?
Yes, I believe we've had several meetings, code review meetings with the fire chief about the.
And the fire chief has our DD package. they should have it reviewed. I haven't been able to contact them yet to talk about the review, but everything for the garage has been set up in a way that, as Andrew mentioned previously, in your cold climate and the necessary to provide utilities throughout the building, it's beneficial from a maintenance standpoint to make sure the garages are tempered. We also have radon detectors inside of that facility. So therefore, we do have venting in the garage to handle that. But the best way to keep things tempered is to keep it enclosed with minimal venting as needed for the radon detection, or carbon monoxide sensor that would release if need be. That keeps all their pipes and everything from freezing, which could cause a maintenance nightmare should that happen in your climate, which is typically cold, very cold, for a longer period of time of the year than most of the rest of the country. So in regards to the architectural features, you know, the headers and the trim around the windows, we changed it to a board and batten style. There's still trim work around the windows. I think, you know, when you talk about the different levels of frosting that a design can have, that is one. But there's still a shadow line, so to speak, around those windows that kind of address what a trim feature does as a header or a seal on a window. We varied the materials to aid in, I think it was talked about, you know, the Kennedy Drive elevation. We varied the materials. We kind of staggered and stepped them to kind of give a unique relief and view or aesthetic to the facade instead of being a flat blank canvas, which I think was one of the comments in your preliminary plat issue as to the reason why we have the breakup of the masonry at that lowest level where the garage is, was to kind of not make that a single plane. So we tried to, again, like Andrew said, hold true to the original concept, not void it, but address it in a different manner as we've gone through, again, as Evan mentioned previously, 2 years of a pandemic and design and trying to keep and hold true to the original intent of the aesthetic and try to help build something for this community that would really enhance it and kind of be a statement.
Seems like, you know, from Marla's feedback that, you know, the lot 15, that elevation, the Kennedy Drive elevation is the sort of primary focus of the feedback. You know, we talked about what we could do for that blank wall on the left-hand side. It's, you know, mechanical space and bathroom space from a floor plan perspective. There is an opportunity to potentially add some small transom windows or something in there to help break that up. We also talked about planting some really big trees in front, you know, as big as is reasonable with the landscape budget that we have, maybe some 4 or 4.5 inch caliper trees that would really help kind of take off quickly and screen that. You know, there's an opportunity, I don't know what the sign, you know, ordinance would allow, but to put some sort of signage or something in that location as well. You know, and we previously acknowledged that we will present an improvement to that central tower feature, bringing it down to grade and adding some storefront in the front of the building. And, you know, I think in terms of the metal grates, my assumption is that the SketchUp model just makes them look a lot better than the Revit one does. But I think, you know, we can provide a detail as to what those metal grates are. I don't think they're meant to look like they do in the Revit model. I think it's just a indication that there'll be a material there. It's not meant to look like the material, if that makes sense. So we can provide a spec on what that material is and the size of it at the locations that are called out.
Yeah, so
Okay.
You said that the comments are mostly about the lot 15 west elevation. I just had Delilah pull this up because the point that I wanted to make here is that these changes have been made on all the facades. It's not the lot 11 west elevation is the biggest, so it shows the most examples. But I think that staff was kind of noting that these changes have been made on all the facades.
Okay, let's regroup here.
Yeah, Don, can I offer a couple comments?
Sure, Mark.
So one is more of a practical comment. If you're going from an open garage to an enclosed garage, obviously you're going to have some serious exhaust fans going that get really loud. Where are those going, and where's sort of the exhaust? Because those things are not quiet, and they have to run quite frequently.
Yeah, so on building 13, I think the exhaust fans that we have are located on the north side, which faces the parking lot. There might be one on the south side that faces 2 Brothers Drive. I have to go back and look at the plan specifically, but they will not be running all the time. They're actuated based on a sensor. So it would really depend on their runnability, their noise, their frequency would depend on the amount of buildup of carbon monoxide or radon as the detectors kind of sense it. So if radon is an issue there, I would say I don't know how often they would run. Carbon monoxide, there is an exchange, and I mean that's kind of how the mechanical systems are built. There isn't a clean air exchange that will typically happen periodically. So I don't doubt that the carbon monoxide sensors shouldn't go off too often, but the variation of when they occur, when they run, all that, I would have to dig deeper into the mechanical design to answer that question fully.
Okay.
Won't you know whether there's a radon issue before you build them?
Well, yes. You can find out through the USGS, I think, if radon is something in your is a standard problem in your area. But this is a HUD project, and a HUD project automatically requires radon detection, despite you having a radon issue or not. So that's really where that design has come from. It's not, I don't really know if there's a radon issue in this specific site, but it's a HUD requirement, so we did provide radon detection as required by that code.
Okay.
And there's ledge on this site, so it makes sense to be proactive on it anyway.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
So the other thing I just want to comment on is that, between preliminary and final, I know that different software rendering engines present things differently, but, it is a valid comment that the preliminary elevations have a different feel to them than the proposed, elevations. I think that, whatever you call it, the term you use, sort of the frosting on the cake. I think, there's a little bit lacking in this one. I don't think the building itself is unattractive. And I actually think, especially if you look at the renderings, the Juliet balcony mesh design does have sort of like a modern feel that goes in line with these buildings, compared to sort of the more traditional picket style Juliet balcony that I think was in the preliminary. But I think it's just like the windows themselves feel like they're more like just punched into, blank walls than having some, casings and trim around them that really have, I think if you had that and you had a little more oomph to it, it wouldn't feel, like it's kind of like this field with some windows in it, as opposed to the preliminary, which definitely had like the headers and sills in them. So I just encourage you to sort of take a look at that, because I think you're close. I think between preliminary and final, it's not that much of a huge difference, but I think that general feel definitely did change from the two.
Okay. Any other comments or questions related to number 7? Okay. Let's move on to number 8. And this is...
Sorry, so what's the resolution? Is the resolution to direct them to go back and do a little work on this?
Mark, what do you think?
I honestly would like to, especially if this is done in Revit, I think, make a change to one window, it applies it across the blanket. I think that I would like to see a little more attention to the window openings so that they're a little more in line with the preliminary. The little detail around them. Because right now they just doesn't feel like there is anything. It feels like it's just a punched opening within the field of the siding.
I like headers.
You kind of lose the scale.
You like what?
For what it's worth, I think it's okay the way it
Yeah.
stands.
Frank, did you say something?
Yeah, I said I like headers.
You like what?
Headers on windows, particularly on buildings as massive as this.
Okay.
It's the difference between just massive and something that looks like a little more sculptural.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I mean, we can take a look at it. There is trim work around each window. It's the same color as the material that's next to it, so it doesn't pop as much, which is more of a modernistic look. But we can take a look at it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and my comment for aesthetic as an architect with an opinion, as we all know that we tend to have those. And it's because we were presented with the preliminary to this. As Dan said, it's fine. It is actually not unattractive, but I think if you were to look at something, I'd like to see that, given some attention.
Okay. Let's move on to number 8. This is staff therefore considers that I think there's a word missing. The applicant has not provided a special treatment in this area, either via site layout, architecture, landscaping, and the objective of the board's preliminary plat finding has not been addressed. So we've kind of covered that, haven't we, Marla?
No, this is a different facade than we've really looked at.
Okay.
So this took me a minute to figure out what we meant at preliminary plat as well, but this is along Two Brothers Drive on lot 13. And what we're noting here is the board had a specific finding about the transition along this facade because the grade was changing. So it was a weird place where you had a lot of blank wall because it was kind of half underground. And so the site plan, so they said, well, you can't do anything really great with the building because it's half underground and half not, but we'd like you to really do something with the site plan. The site plan actually has a gap in it in this area, so it feels to me like they didn't meet that preliminary plat condition because they don't even show what they're doing.
Andrew.
So I think, if you wanted to just pull up, I think it's page 33 of the packet that we submitted. Sorry, I don't have all the page numbers of your packet memorized, but it just shows a rendering of this facade. We spent, I would say, a decent amount of time on this facade. And I think that, if you look at the slide on page 33, we can sort of walk through all of the different elements that we used. So you can't see it, the rendering isn't focused on the sort of angle, but just for some reference, I mean, after preliminary plat, we added the large raised cafe patio that
Can
you
you
see.
orient the board to what part of the thing they're looking at here?
Right, so this is the four-way intersection, the corner of lot 13 facing the four-way intersection. So the Summit project, I showed you a similar rendering looking the other direction at the Summit building across the street. But this is, if you're standing on lot 10 on Summit's corner, looking at the corner of lot 13 at the four-way intersection, what you would see.
I'm just going to give them an overview to orient them, and then I'll go back to your slide.
Right.
Andrew, so you're standing, let me just go to this page here.
Here, right? And looking that way?
Right there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll go back.
So before you go, the preliminary plat condition was about this facade here. Oh, that didn't show up. There it is.
Okay, so now we'll go back to the one that you have.
So backing up, I mean, the landscaping plans do have a gap in them right here. I think there is landscaping there. It's just not visible on the plans. So we're going to address that. and that'll get, forwarded to you in an update. What I was going to say was that, essentially on this side, if you look down on the lower left, sort of over that blue Volkswagen, you can see a sort of storefront canopy. We added that storefront canopy. There's glazing in that area and a big door into the common hallway, actually a window into the pet spa, where there's like some kind of mosaic tiles and stuff on the wall, like a really cool wave looking mosaic that is planned on that wall. So looking through that storefront, you're going to be looking at this beautiful mosaic tile thing and the pet wash. We added the roof over the top of it. We've got the metal grates treating the brick openings, and then we added the patio and cafe to that facade as well, which includes the raised cement seating area that you're seeing, including that retaining wall, all of which has landscaping surrounding it, trees surrounding it, treating this facade with all sorts of changes and, updates and refinements. So I think largely maybe we did hit the mark on this. Maybe the gaps in the plans are an oversight, and we can update those. And that would be sort of
just to add to that description too. So that cafe that we added that you guys just recently approved for the neighborhood commercial use is a 2-story volume. And so you have a cafe level on the first level that's open to the public. And then above it, kind of on a mezzanine wraparound, you have those WeWork spaces. So it's, you can sit in there and have a quiet time upstairs with your computer and do work from home, or you can sit down and have, more public, cup of coffee with friends or, charcuterie or whatever you want to do. But it really animates that corner. And because it's a 2-story volume, it'll be a really cool kind of jewelry box to look into.
Nice.
And we will provide the landscape plans for that gap so that can be reviewed. And if they need supplement, we'll supplement them to ensure there's all kinds of plants in there.
Okay. I'm looking at the clock.
I just wanted to, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Carolyn.
I just wanted to say that the plants are called out. The match line is just the part of the street got cut off, and I can just slide that over. But yeah, there's planting all along that edge and lawn in front of it.
Okay. So I'm looking at the clock. It's almost 10 o'clock. I think this is probably a good place to stop, although I will note that the next 2 comments, the first one is we need civil engineering drawings, and the next comment is we need a landscaping plan. So unless we need to talk about either of those, can you get those to us?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I can do that.
Thanks. And then we'll pick up when we meet again with this and your other proposals. So thank you for your patience. And I would entertain a motion to continue the hearing.
Dawn, do you want to give any public the opportunity to comment?
Well, do we do that before we close the hearing, or before we finished reviewing all the comments?
Sometimes we do.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, they've sat here.
Okay, thank you. So are there any members of the public who want to comment at this point? Are there any online?
Not seeing any.
Delilah, okay, all right. Okay, thank you for your patience. And I would entertain a motion.
Continuing to April 5th, just to continue the conversation.
You are already full on April 5th, I'm sorry.
Okay.
But we can do April 19th.
Okay. So I'll make them.
I think I can incorporate some new stuff, but I also want to be just aware of, I guess I'm still living the feedback I got from the board a couple years ago, which is finish what we have open before we start new stuff. Is that still the way the board wants to approach development review in general?
What do you mean by that?
Well, I have stuff on my desk for months. Like I have your next 3 meetings sitting on my desk ready to go. So I can either on April 19th schedule some of that new stuff, or I can make room for this to be continued. And generally, I've been generally living the feedback that I got from the board a few years ago, which is like, let's finish one thing before we start a new thing. But you know, it also feels kind of crappy to tell people who have a new project who are not going to hear you for 2 months. I don't know. It's a tough call.
Evan started to say something. Evan, go ahead.
Yeah, I was, you know, don't make your schedule around my plans, but I am out of town for the 19th, and if at all possible, I would greatly appreciate having the opportunity to be present for that, even if it's remote. I'm not going to have the ability to be in front of a computer, so.
So Marla, what does May 5th look like? Or 4th, or whatever that one that we did previously.
Yeah, May 4th is good, because then I can clear
And that
some
gives us
stuff.
an opportunity to address some of the things sitting on your desk.
Yeah, it will, and it'll also give us an opportunity to work with Andrew and Evan to maybe clear some stuff up rather than just finishing. I know it's after 10 o'clock, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to ask this question anyway. Sometimes Andrew and Evan have like a burning question that they really, really want to get to before we close for the night. Do you want to give them that opportunity?
Sure, go for it, guys. You're muted.
I think probably it would be the next agenda item. So I don't know if we're planning on, there is one more agenda item. It's still us. And that's probably a pretty quick question, but you might have to warn the next hearing before I can ask it or whatever, you know, swear, open it or whatnot.
Right.
I see.
Okay, so no burning questions on this one then. Okay. So May 4th then.
All right.
We appreciate you throwing out the opportunity though, Marla.
I'll make a motion that we continue preliminary plat application SD 2205, 225 Kennedy Drive to May 4th.
I'll second that. Any discussion? All in favor of continuing this hearing to what, May 4th, did you say?
May 4th, yep.
May 4th, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Dan's falling asleep. Any nays? Okay, the motion is carried. So we will see you back here on May 4th.
So do we want to open?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
So if you either need to continue the related site plan application. We have to continue it to a date certain. And you have to decide whether you're going to entertain Andrew's burning question.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Or you need to open it first.
We have to open it.
We have to open what?
The next application.
Agenda item number 7.
Okay, all right. How do we do that? It's very late.
I'm so sorry.
How do we open it, Marla?
Well, so you read the description, then you ask who's here, and then you swear them in.
Okay, all right. The next item agenda, site plan application SP 22008 and conditional use application CU 2201 of O'Brien Farm Road LLC to construct a 52 space commercial parking lot on an existing 4.3 acre undeveloped lot for the use of tenants on the adjoining multifamily residential lots at 255 Kennedy Drive. Let's make it brief. Go ahead, Andrew.
I do.
You want to swear them in?
I do.
I'm
You
sorry.
solemnly
I'm
swear to tell
sorry,
the truth,
Dawn.
the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury.
I do.
All right.
do.
Okay.
So this question was just about the next step for this and what the easiest solution is to this sort of problem. If you wanted to scroll down to like a site plan of the use of the project, I think you guys all are aware that part of our parking is on an adjacent lot. There were a number of reasons for that. We talked about it extensively at preliminary plat. In order to permit it, we need a conditional use approval. I think there was an oversight on our part and an issue that never came up at preliminary plat, which is that if you are looking at this picture right below where it says lot 13 area 2.1 acres, if you sort of drew a line from that corner of the lot line where the hand is, if you draw that line straight down the page to the sidewalk, basically down the middle of the travel lane of the parking lot, the little triangle that you're getting right there to the left of the purple and to the right of the solid black is in the R12 district, which doesn't allow for commercial parking. So that like 40 square feet or whatever it is, you know, the parking wouldn't be technically allowed. I guess I'm just wondering if the easiest solution is to move the lot 13 lot line, or Marla had said that having a master plan amendment to expand the master plan. I don't think we have a preference. I just want to know which one to do. So we'll just get it started.
Oh, thanks for clarifying that, Andrew. I think this really illustrates, you know, why the plans should show the zoning district boundaries, because when we looked at it in the office, we thought the line encompassed much more of the parking area. We thought it was like that much. So, you know, that's a big difference. If you want,
I think that line that I had drawn is after the 50-foot adjustment the board is allowed to grant.
Okay.
So,
well,
and that leaves that little wedge.
That's a big solution. That's a big difference, because then you only have what, like portions of 3 parking spaces in that wouldn't be allowed. So maybe the solution is just to, I know you're going to hate this, but I'm going to say maybe you just get rid of those 3 parking spaces until such time as you have a building on lot 17.
And we could add them to lot 17 on the other side, I presume, somewhere.
Right.
Like off that
I mean,
turn
that's
or whatever.
really the fastest way to skin this onion.
And well, the travel lane is okay then in your perspective?
I guess the board would have to make a determination on that, and maybe that's something we can discuss at the next meeting. Is you know, the commercial parking is a prohibited use in the R12 zoning district, but would a travel lane to serve commercial parking be a prohibited use?
Okay. So we can look at that at the next time we review this.
I think continuing this to the same May 4th date.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Okay. Then I'll make a motion, we continue site plan application SB 22008 and conditional use application CU 2201 of O'Brien Farm Road to May 4th.
Thanks, Mark, and I'll second that. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? No. The motion is carried. We will see you on May 4th.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for your patience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Have a good night.
All right, board, can we, Marla, can we do the minutes next time?
Yeah, I'm getting so nervous about the January ones, but yeah.
It's just that it's late.
I know,
It's really late.
and I never save you room for minutes, and that is my fault.
Well, you got a lot of pressure on you, I understand. So.
I even had comments on them.
Oh, all right, save them.
Yes.
So we don't need to vote to close, do we?
No, you do not.
Okay. Thanks for your patience, everyone. We'll see you in 3 weeks.
Yes.
Yes.
Take care. Happy
Good night,
spring.
everyone.
Good night.
All right.
Recording stopped.